Chapter 44. Some of these things were still intact. Amon couldn't help but remember that Madanzo didn't have a proper set of armor, and Link didn't even have a real staff. There was a special way to make a staff. It wasn't as simple as embedding a parangan in a bone. It was just to make a staff look like a staff. Thinking of this, Amon pointed the bone in his hand in all directions, and used spatial magic to stimulate the bone to absorb everything. He barely succeeded. At the moment of success, the speed of absorption was extremely fast. In almost the blink of an eye, all the objects that had been stimulated by his magic were gone. Suddenly, Amon let out a short cry of surprise. He leaned forward and knelt on the ground, the bone falling from his hand. His right shoulder was in pain. If he hadn't let go in time, his forearm would have been fractured by the force of the sudden fall. The bone became extremely heavy in an instant. Even though Amon was already a third-level warrior, and could kill a bull with one punch, he couldn't lift such a heavy thing with one hand. But when the bone fell to the ground, it didn't make much noise, as if its weight hadn't increased at all. It was a strange feeling. The spatial artifact had absorbed so many things, but Amon felt as if it was bearing the weight of everything in his hand. But when the bone fell to the ground, it was as light as before. It was just that Amon, as the caster, couldn't lift it. No wonder Bear said that it was only a theory that a third-level mage could use this spatial artifact. It seemed that there were more advanced spatial magic secrets that Amon couldn't grasp at the moment. Since he couldn't lift it, Amon had a stupid idea. He simply knelt on the ground and held the bone in his hand. Instead of picking it up, he used spatial magic to stimulate it again. He could feel that there seemed to be another space inside the bone, and all the things were inside it. He used spatial magic again to take out the things one by one. Only then did he stand up again with the bone as light as a feather. Amon held the bone in his hand, and thought for a long time. In the end he made a decision. Since he couldn't take everything away, he would take the best and keep it within the weight he could carry. With the strength of a third-rank warrior, he could already carry a lot of things. There were many things that Amon did not know, and he did not have the time to identify them one by one. He only picked out 2 sets of armor for long swords, a shield, 3 javelins, 2 battle axes, 3 staffs, 8 scrolls, and 9 ordinary parangons. After some thought, he put Saintess Troni's headdress into the bone as well. These things were quite heavy, and ordinary people would not be able to carry them with their combined weight. However, Amon could still manage to lift them. Then he did an experiment. He carefully put the bone into the bag on his shoulder and let go. As he expected, the bag did not change at all. This meant that the weight of the bone did not increase as much as he felt. Otherwise, the strap on his shoulder would have been broken by the fall. The weight of all the objects in the invisible space only acted on him, the caster. This was a headache, but at the same time, he felt a little lucky. Otherwise, it would not be easy to find a place to put the bone. The bone was in the state of being put away. It could take in many things as a spatial artifact, but it could not hold living things. Amon had confirmed this when he came here. At that time, he put away the invisible ship and threw out the 5 ironbacks. After doing all this, Amon pulled the bone out of the bag again, and pointed at the god's tear in the air. Sure enough, the shining golden parangan suddenly disappeared, and was taken into the invisible space of the artifact. The belly of the mountain suddenly became dark, and then he heard the roar of the ironbacks and the sound of water hitting the rocks from the other side of the tunnel. Amon quickly took out a parangan and threw it into the air. The soft white light illuminated the surroundings again. A few ironbacks ran from the other side of the tunnel into the hall in the belly of the mountain, still dripping with water. It turned out that at the moment when Amon put away the god's tear, the illusory cliff outside like a transparent barrier suddenly disappeared, and a wall of water as high as several people poured in, drowning the place where the ironbacks were. They did not know what had happened, and they were frightened by the water. They hurriedly ran in to report to Amon. Crazy Ol once said that Bear was best at message magic and spatial magic. His attainments in these 2 magic were unparalleled in the entire empire of Igut. It seemed that the cliff outside was a magic space created by Bear by activating the god's tear. It was both a disguise and a barrier, sealing everything that had happened here in the belly of the mountain until Amon came. It was already dark. Amon didn't want to risk his life to cross the flood shrouded in darkness in the wind and rain. Besides, he was quite tired from using magic power continuously today. He needed a good rest and meditation to recover his strength. He put away the parangan, and the belly of the mountain fell into darkness again. Amon sat on the stone platform in the darkness, with his back to the tunnel, looking at the direction of the cave wall engraved with writing, and sat quietly all night. The next day was still windy and rainy, and thunder rolled in the distance. When he walked out of the tunnel, he was faced with the mighty flood. The concave part of the mountain wall had been directly exposed, and the water had overflowed the platform where he had stood. It was still dark under the cover of the dark clouds, but after dawn, he could see the mountain in the distance. Amon activated the bone again and unfolded it into an invisible ship, taking Schrödinger and the 5 ironbacks on their way back through the flood. Whether they were humans, cats, or ironbacks who had lost their homes, they all had their own thoughts. They barely made a sound along the way, and the invisible ship drifted slowly on the flood. When the bone unfolded into the invisible ship to carry them across the water, they could also see the things that Amon had taken into the invisible space piled up on the ship. Normally, Schrödinger should be very interested in them, for it looked so excited to enter the belly of the mountain. Amon found that the mood of the cat was not right, and it looked very depressed. Schrödinger used to be lazy and greedy, and later became arrogant and pretentious, but he had never seen it so depressed. Amon wasn't used to the melancholy cat. Crazy Ol was dead, and today it was finally confirmed that Bear had fallen 30 years ago. Of course, this was not good news. Although he got the information he wanted, and everything should be perfect, Amon's expression was inexplicably heavy, and he looked very depressed. But no one could talk to him about anything, so he spoke to the cat. Schrödinger, what's wrong? You look very sad. Are you sad for Bear and Trony too? The cat squatted on the bow of the ship, and ignored him as if it did not hear him. Amon asked again, Schrödinger, are you looking for something but can't find it? Can you tell me? Also, where did you come from? Why can you write hieroglyphs? Schrödinger still looked ahead with a sad face, and continued to treat Amon as heir. Amon pondered for a long time, and finally asked the question in his heart. Schrödinger, are you also a god? Why can't the puppet eyes detect your existence? Or is someone's soul sealed in the cat's body? Schrödinger sneezed and actually lay down to sleep, completely ignoring Amon. Amon finally said, You haven't eaten for a day and a night. Schrödinger, are you hungry? I'll cook something delicious for you. Schrödinger did not respond, but the king ironback suddenly sneezed, glanced at Amon and growled. There was no food on this ship. Unless the ironback was slaughtered and barbecued. Ammonius suddenly left the village, and did not return for a day and a night. Link and the clansmen were very uneasy, but they did not know where he went. They waited anxiously at the 2 entrances of the village early in the morning, a little flustered, as if they had lost the most important thing in their lives. When it was close to noon, someone suddenly shouted in surprise, Look, that's the god's servant. That mythical cat. From a distance, Schrödinger came out of the woods, with a melancholy look and a lazy pace, as if he did not see the people standing at the entrance of the village at all. Link had already run out of the village entrance to greet him with his bone club, but suddenly jumped high, turned around and ran back with a cry. In the dense forest behind Schrödinger, 5 huge ironbacks came out in a row, and in the middle was the king ironback that almost killed Link. But these ironbacks looked very strange, crawling slowly behind Schrödinger, like 5 docile kittens. Seeing the wise and brave patriarch frightened like this, the cavemen also panicked and let out a cry of alarm. Some people were already ready to run back to get their weapons. At this time a voice shouted, Don't panic, these ironbacks have been subdued by me, I brought them back. With the voice, Amon also walked out of the woods with the iron staff in his hand. The screams of the people turned into cheers, and Link, who was running back, turned around and greeted him again, shouting from a distance, Ammonius, you are finally back. The people are waiting, you have brought a miracle. Although he was very happy, he did not dare to approach, still hiding from the big ironbacks, with a look of lingering fear. Amon said, I went to the flood to do something, and save these beasts, don't worry about me. Link, come with me, I have something to talk to you about. After the people dispersed, Link ordered someone to bring delicious barbecue, which was the antelope that had just been hunted yesterday, roasted with seasonings. Amon first put a plate for Schrödinger, and then let Link sit down and eat with him. The Ironback stayed obediently outside the house where Amon lived, and the clansmen stayed far away from them, not daring to approach. When Link came in just now, he had been pulling Amon's sleeve, not daring to go far. Chapter 45. Amon didn't explain where he went yesterday. He couldn't tell Link either, and some secrets didn't need to be known. He asked Link if there was an area rich in iron or nearby. Perhaps he could find swamps and pools for the Ironbacks to live in. Link thought for a moment and replied, "There is such a place. There is a pool in the dense forest under the rocks in the southeast of the village, not far from the road leading out of the mountain. Do you want to keep these Ironbacks next to the village?" Amon laughed. "Why are you afraid? In fact, the Ironbacks don't eat people. They are omnivores, eating aquatic plants, fish and shrimp in the mud, and occasionally preying on small animals. These Ironbacks are just a little bigger and a little fierce, but they are already very human. Since they have been tamed by me, they will naturally not harm the people here. They can also be the protectors of the village. As for you, you can't always be afraid of them. In the future, when you get familiar with them, you may be able to use them as practice opponents. They are very smart and know what you want to do. Practice hard, and when you become a third-level mage, I will give you a real staff and a fighting weapon." Upon hearing this, Link, who had been a little worried at first, was instantly overjoyed. He grinned from ear to ear and nodded. "God, Amon, thank you so much for your gift. How could I accept it? I wonder what your devout servant can do for you?" Amon waved his hand. "You have done a lot for me. If there is anything I need, I will tell you directly." Link rolled his eyes and said tentatively, "Ammonius, can I ask you one thing?" Amon lowered his head and began to eat. After swallowing the roast meat in his mouth, he said, "Just say it." Link's tone was a little stuttering. "Can I learn to write? You know that our people are illiterate, and you said that I'd better learn to write. But who can teach me?" Amon replied without thinking, "Oh, you should learn to write, or it will be difficult to learn some advanced magic in the future. I will teach you when I have time. This is not easy. You have to put in the effort to learn it." Link nodded his head like a chicken pecking at its food. "Of course, I will definitely do my best. Thank you for your kindness. No matter how hard it is to write, it can't be more difficult than magic, right?" Link was in high spirits when he left. He felt as if his steps were light as a feather, as if he was about to fly. He finally felt as if a stone had been lifted from his heart. Yesterday morning, when Amon asked about the way out of the mountain, he was worried that Amon would suddenly leave, and then Amon would disappear with the cat. Link suspected that he had left without saying goodbye, and he was very sad. He had asked Amon if he could teach him how to write. On one hand, he really wanted to learn. On the other hand, he was testing Amon's attention. Learning to write was not something that could be done in 1 or 2 days. At least, it meant that Amon would stay here for a long time. Amon also said that he would give him a real staff, but that would have to wait until he became a third-level mage. Link was so excited that he forgot that Amon only had a branch and a leather bag. There was no staff at all. Where could he get one? But Link didn't think too much about it. In his mind, Amon was almost like a god. It was possible that he could create any miracle. Even the 5 fierce Ironbacks were brought back by him like obedient kittens. The landslide cut off a tributary of the Euphrates River, forming a dammed lake under the plateau. The road to Saya was submerged. Amon had no way out. Even if the road could still be used, Amon had no way out. The town of Duk no longer existed, and he couldn't go back. Now Amon had 2 choices. One was to stay in the village and continue to practice body arts and magic. The other was to go down the mountain and enter the kingdom of Babylon, which would be his first stop on the continent. He didn't plan to stay in the caveman's village forever, but he was not in a hurry to leave. Last night in the cave, he had made up his mind. The next step was to practice body arts and pass the test of purity of blood, to become an advanced 4th-level warrior. Then he would continue to practice magic and become a 4th-level mage. Only then would he leave. Meditation was not the only way to practice high and middle-level magic. Meditation was also an important experience for mages. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to understand the higher level of magic. Otherwise, Crazy Ol wouldn't have traveled all over the continent in the past 100 years. However, the test of the purity of the bloodline that Amon was about to face in the future was very clear in Bear's annotation. He needed to concentrate on his training and focus on the changes that had taken place in his body. It was best to do so in a quiet and undisturbed environment. Therefore, this caveman's village was the most suitable place. After Link left, Amon noticed Schrödinger. The pot of roast meat had been eaten up. The cat was sleeping soundly in the grass. Although it was depressed, it didn't mistreat itself. Amon's leather bag was placed next to the grass, containing the bone. Normally, Schrödinger would put the bone in the grass and press it down with its paw. But today it didn't. It wasn't that Schrödinger didn't touch the leather bag. The opening of the leather bag had been opened by the cat's paw, revealing a corner of the bone. However, Schrödinger didn't take it away. It seemed that the cat couldn't move the bone either. Maybe Schrödinger didn't have any magical power. His previous guesses might be wrong. Amon took the bone and took out all the items stored inside. He studied them carefully. Since he had promised to give Link a staff, he might as well take the opportunity to pick one for himself. Instead of looking at the weapons, Amon was most interested in the scrolls. There were 8 scrolls in total, of different sizes and lengths. This was the first time Amon had seen a magic scroll. Such a precious magic artifact would never belong to a blacksmith's son. It was difficult for him to figure out the use of the scroll, because once it was written, it couldn't be opened. Once it was opened with magic, it would activate magic. It was a one-time consumable. If the person who wrote the scroll didn't explain it himself, and it fell into the hands of someone who didn't understand the magic, the other person might not know what kind of magic effect and power it would have after it was opened. Writing a scroll not only took a lot of effort, but also didn't guarantee success. No one wanted the magic power they had painstakingly condensed to be used by someone else, unless they voluntarily gave it to someone else. At this time, the person would clearly explain it to the user. Of course, all kinds of scrolls had a specific way of making them. Those who were very familiar with scrolls, or those who were very skilled in detection magic would be able to recognize many kinds of scrolls without any explanation. But Amon didn't have that ability yet. Some of the scrolls he got might not have been made by the person who carried them. There were markings on the scrolls. At first glance, it was obvious that they were used by the mages from Igut. The markings were written in the cursive script of Igut, which explained what kind of magic the scroll would cast after it was opened, and what kind of power it would have. Amon was very lucky. 5 of the 8 scrolls had markings on them. They were different types of advanced magic scrolls. These things were very useful at critical moments. It meant that casting the corresponding advanced magic didn't need to consume one's magic power. If Madanzo saw it, he would definitely calculate how much these magic scrolls were worth, and then he would be very surprised. The other 3 scrolls didn't have any markings on them. Amon didn't know what kind of scrolls they were, so he didn't dare to use them carelessly. He put them away for the time being. Then he took out the 3 staffs he got today, and wanted to test the effects of casting magic on them. The staffs weren't heavy. Amon would take them if he could carry them. Unlike armors and weapons, they were useless after being destroyed along with the inlaid parangons. There were only 3 staffs left in the cave. The most special one was made of yellow-brown wood. It was very strong and durable. After 30 years, it still showed no signs of decay. The top of the staff was inlaid with a turroculus. The precious special parangons showed that this staff was extraordinary. Amon didn't know how it was made, but the turroculus seemed to grow naturally in the grain of the wood. Only a few sharp edges could be seen. Amon had just activated the parangons with his magic power. Before he could use the staff to test the effects of the various magic spells, he suddenly heard a voice in his ear. The one who is lucky enough to come here and pick up my staff. No matter who you are, please listen to my last words. I am the chief priest of the shrine of Cape of the Egyptian Empire, the 7th level supreme mage Nero. I am ordered by the Empire of Igut to kill Bear and the traitorous adoratress. I don't believe that Trony would betray the goddess. I am also indebted to Bear, but I have to carry out the order of the Empire. This is also an oracle. I heard the voice of Horus in the shrine. He ordered me to find these two people and kill them. It is Horus, the god I have believed in all my life. Bear is a destroyer. He has angered the gods and will destroy himself. I will fight him and face my own destruction because I know how powerful he is. There was a crack in my heart. Why didn't the omnipotent Horus punish Bear himself? Why did he send an oracle to me? It is because of this hesitation that I left this message. The Taraculus could be used as a carrier for message magic. Crazy. Ol left a lot of messages in the Taraculus that Amon received. The owner of the staff was also proficient in message magic. He left a message in the Taraculus, which was accidentally read by Amon. This person claimed to be the chief priest of the Shrine of Cape, which should have been 30 years ago. He was one of the supreme mages who had been ordered to kill Bear. It seemed that Bear had caused a lot of trouble. Even the king of Igut, Horus, was alarmed and even sent an oracle to this supreme mage. Having learned his lesson from the last time when he was distracted while reading the message, Amon was still focused on activating the Taraculus even though he was surprised. The supreme mage's voice continued. Chapter 46. The high and mighty God may be watching the world, watching how people express their faith and how they choose their own destiny. I have been given power by the gods, and this power is to protect the dignity of the gods and the Egyptian empire. I think this is my destiny. God, I have not turned my back on you. But God is not the only one who has a will. I am surprised where Bear got his strength and courage. When he passed through Cape States, I tried to persuade him to return to the embrace of the temple, but I did not keep him. Bear told me that mortals can also become gods. In this, God deceives us all. We are all deceived. Great Horus, I admit that I am curious. I once said to Bear, "Do not tempt me." I have long since rejected the temptation of the devil. But is the eternal temptation of becoming a god really the devil in people's hearts? I hope to know the answer. Even at the last moment of my life. Did Bear also destroy himself because of this temptation? I wanted to see Bear confirm the answer, so I let him and Trony leave the border of Igut. Although I could not stop him alone, I did not try my best to stop him. He is my kinsman and my benefactor. I could not make up my mind to challenge him with all my courage. But today I heard the voice of God. The king and the army of Memphis came with a decree ordering me to kill Bear. I knew that I could not escape fate. My message magic came from Bear, and I left a mark on Trony's ornament. Why did I do this? Was it God's will? I left secretly and did not have time to say goodbye to everyone. I knew that once I left, I could not return, not because of God or because of Bear. My staff belongs to the Temple of Cape. To the one who obtained it, I hope you will return it to me. What belongs to God? I do not want to owe anything in my life. You must be a mage to be able to read the message I left behind, so I also left 3 scrolls next to the staff. These are my gifts to you in return for all you have done for me. I also left a ring, a relic of my family. Please give it to my family in Cape States. You will be rewarded in another way. In the ring is my will, telling my descendants how to repay you. When you return the staff to the Shrine of Cape, please find Lord Drick, and ask him to find a supreme mage proficient in spatial magic to take out the will from the ring and read it out. Lord Drick is trustworthy. The message of the supreme mage Nero ended here. It was as if he was speaking in front of them when he was alive. This was a message that could not be forged. At the same time, other messages naturally entered Amon's mind, introducing the 3 scrolls mentioned in the last words. It was the 3 scrolls that Amon could not identify. The silver-white axis, the slender one, was called space turbulence. It was the best way to escape when one was trapped in a magical space. However, the casting of space turbulence would produce countless spatial cracks, which could hurt the caster himself. Therefore, it was a very dangerous high-level magic. Space turbulence was a very dangerous supreme magic. It did not consume one's own magic power to cast it, and one could also use spatial artifacts to protect oneself. The other scroll with a golden axis, the shorter one, was called Message Annihilation. It could disrupt the sealed information, and was a destructive magic. High-level message magic combined with spatial magic could not only be used to store and transmit information, but could also be used to make all kinds of camouflage and traps. Message Annihilation was used to destroy these traps and camouflage. It seemed that the Supreme Mage had come prepared. He knew very well that Bear was proficient in spatial magic and message magic, so he had brought the scrolls that he had made with him. He did not know why he did not use them in the battle. Maybe it was too late or unnecessary. Both of these scrolls were supreme magic scrolls. In theory, although they did not require the user to consume the corresponding amount of magic power, there were still requirements for the user. The user had to use magic power to control the casting of the magic. Therefore, only advanced mages or above could use them. As for the last scroll, Nero did not explain what it was. He only said that if the staff and the ring were sent back to Cape States according to his will, the records of his making of the scroll could be found in the shrine. However, Nero emphasized that this gray scroll was extremely precious, and its value even exceeded that of the staff and ring. Before obtaining his instructions, it must not be used easily. After reading it, Amon blinked and thought for a long time. Not only did the mage leave his will in the staff, but he also left a will in the ring. It seemed that the ring was also a spatial artifact that could store things. And Nero specifically told him that when the staff was sent back to the Shrine of Cape, he should ask Lord Drick to invite a supreme mage who was proficient in spatial magic to open the ring and read the will. This showed that it was very difficult to open the ring. At the same time, asking the trustworthy Lord Drick to be the notary was to ensure that his will could be carried out, and that his family would not go back on their words. Nero had already left 3 scrolls as compensation for returning the staff. What kind of compensation would he give for returning the ring? Amon was very curious, but he could not see it. Amon held the gray scroll in his hand for a long time. Nero said that this scroll was more precious than the staff and the ring. However, if he did not carry out his will, he would not be able to get the instructions. No matter how precious it would only be an item that could not be used or recognized. Amon was skeptical. He suddenly thought of a possibility. The Supreme Mage was worried that the person who got the relic would not carry out his will, so he deliberately said that. Amon had guessed it right. The gray scroll could never be used. If someone got it but did not fulfill Nero's will and kept everything for himself, and eventually used or sold the scroll without permission, the only result would be death. It was the most precious scroll Nero had ever made in his life. It was the crystallization of his painstaking effort and skill, but its value could not be measured by wealth, because its use was too special. Amon had never heard of Nero. Nero grew up in the Cape States, and later became the chief priest of the Shrine of Cape. He became a supreme mage in his early 20s, and was known as the Genius Nero. He was also the most brilliant master of magic scroll making in the entire empire of Igut. He was obsessed with making all kinds of scrolls and spent countless time and energy on it. Perhaps it was because of this that Nero never became an 8th-level mage for more than 40 years. The Cape States of Igut, like the city of Assur of Babylon, were located at the strategic crossroads of various countries. Today, the city of Assur was overseen by an 8th-level supreme mage, Goliath. In the past, the Cape States also had a supreme mage, Nero. The Shrine of Cape suffered the heaviest losses in the pursuit of Bear. Because it was the closest to Bear's final escape route, it also had the largest number of people. Many people, including the chief priest Nero, did not return. At that time, the empire of Igut was already very powerful. It had conquered the Hittite kingdom through war, so the border had never been threatened. In addition, there were no supreme mages willing to stay in this remote city, so there had been no supreme mage in Cape for the past 30 years. Today, the chief priest Roddick was also the chief priest of Cape States. He was not a supreme mage, but a very capable local governor. As for the Lord Dick mentioned in Nero's last words, it was not Roddick, but Roddick's father. Although the chief priest of a city was formally appointed by the pharaohs of Igut, it was a hereditary position in many places. Amon could not understand the gray scroll anyway, and it seemed that he could not give the staff to Link. Whether he returned the staff to Cape States as Nero had said or not, it would be useful to keep it. He put the scroll and the staff back into the bone, shook the bone, and took out a ring. The ring looked very ordinary. It was a simple ring, similar to the color of bronze, with a pentagonal magic circle carved on it. There were no other decorations. When Amon put it into the bone, he did not pay much attention to it. After all, it was a complete little thing, so he put it into the invisible space. Now that he took it out, he felt that the little ring was very heavy, almost as heavy as a thick Magog shield. Amon had experience using spatial artifacts, so he knew that there were more things in the ring than just a will. It was funny that a mere level 3 magician actually had 3 spatial artifacts. He couldn't see what was inside the ring, and he couldn't use the ventussel at all. He could barely activate the bone, but he couldn't use it to its full potential. These were all treasures that mages dreamed of. It was a waste to fall into Amon's hands. If the news got out, who knew how many people would be jealous of him? The unexpected incident did not make Amon forget his original intention. After putting everything away, he finally picked out another staff for Link. This staff was not inlaid with special parangons, but it was inlaid with 7 ordinary parangons in a spiral pattern. The material was very special, and Amon could not tell what it was made of. Embedding parangons into a staff wasn't easy, and the more the better. The process of making a staff was quite complicated, as it needed to combine the effects of activating the magic. The more complicated a staff was, the higher the material requirements were, and the more difficult it was to make. This staff must be the work of a master craftsman. Amon tested it, and found that it could significantly enhance the effect of casting magic, especially the speed at which it could be cast. Amon did not take it as a very good thing. After all, it was far inferior to the bone, and obviously not as magical as the other staffs in his hands. It was only suitable for Link. Now Amon had the mentality of riches are fleeting clouds. He had seen and owned too many parangons, and all the things in his hands were treasures. Unconsciously, he had become accustomed to it. Chapter 47. There was a joke in the streets of the continent that when the noble mages used magic, they were not only demonstrating the power of the gods, but also comparing who could spend more money. Even the simplest staff would require an ordinary god stone to be embedded in it. If it was a rare high-grade staff, it could be converted into coins and thrown out, and it would definitely be enough to bury an opponent. Amon did not give the staff to Link immediately. He put it away for the time being. When Link became a 3rd-level mage, he would give it to him as a gift before he left. After the thunder, the rain continued for 7 days and 7 nights before it stopped. At its highest point, the flood was only a few feet away from the lowest part of the city wall. After the rain stopped, the sun shone again and the water gradually receded. The city was finally saved. Thousands of people cheered, their voices piercing the sky and echoing for a long time. Goliath finally walked down the city wall with the staff in his hand. He had almost exhausted all his magic. The fingernails and knuckles of the hand holding the staff had turned white. He could not help but tremble, but he tried his best not to show a trace of weakness. At this time, an ordinary person could poke Goliath to the ground with one finger. It was difficult for him to even walk, but he insisted on not being helped and walked firmly back to the shrine. The cheering people on the street saw Goliath and took the initiative to make a path for him. The crowd automatically parted like a wave. Everyone was shouting, "Thank the gods, thank Enril for his protection, thank our noble supreme mage Goliath." The voices rose and fell like a tsunami in the city. The flood outside the city was receding in the sound waves. Thanking the gods had become a habit, like a natural prefix in pronunciation. Everyone shouted it unconsciously, but thanking Goliath was from the bottom of their hearts. It was the common voice of thousands of people. Before, Goliath was respected by everyone because of his transcendent status and achievements. Today he received the cheers of a god. For the first time, it was not only because of his status but also because of his achievements. No one knew for sure whether or not there was a god's blessing, let alone seeing it with their own eyes. But without Goliath, Saya City would never be saved. Everyone knew this. Goliath smiled amiably at everyone, appearing humble and noble. His slow steps were calm and firm. He finally climbed up the long steps and entered the magnificent shrine of Enril. After his figure disappeared in the shadow of the shrine gate, he suddenly swayed and almost lost his balance. He said to his disciple Walter, "Quick, help me to the back and set up a healing magic circle. I need a good rest. You will assist Governor Schmull in handling the disaster relief and other matters after the flood recedes. I will appoint you as the temporary high priest. After a period of time, I will request the royal capital to issue an official appointment." In addition to the oracle and chief priest Goliath, there were 3 other high priests in the Saya shrine: Cosman, Jeremiah, and Governor Schmull. Jeremiah was killed by Gabriel when he ambushed Roddick's caravan. Cosman was killed by Goliath for abandoning the city and running away. If Goliath was not here, there would be no one in charge of the shrine except for the symbolic high priest. So Goliath appointed his disciple Walter to take over the shrine. The high priest was the noblest position in Saya after the oracle and the governor. It needed to be appointed by the king, so Goliath could only appoint Walter as the temporary high priest. But if Walter could handle the affairs of the city and the shrine well, with the recommendation of Goliath and Schmull, Walter would become the official high priest. He would rise from an ordinary mage to one of the most honorable lords in Saya. Walter presided over the magic formation on the city wall and helped Goliath protect Saya. He had won the respect of the people and all mages. It was only natural that he should replace Cosman, who had run away. So Goliath gave his disciple this opportunity. Walter was appointed in the face of danger. After the cheers of the people gradually subsided, there were still many things to do. How to rescue and arrange the refugees who had flooded into Saya, help them return to their destroyed homes, distribute enough food and seeds in batches to survive this year's famine, and support the next year's harvest. Also, they had to apply for relief and assistance from the nearby city-states and kingdoms, calculate the losses caused by the flood, and so on. Some of the materials received by the victims came from the cities and kingdoms, some had to be registered and repaid in the future, and some were loans from the shrines. It was a job to salvage the situation after a disaster, but it was also a good opportunity to fill the pockets of the people. If a greedy or incompetent official took over the job, it would cause discontent and even a revolt. So it was also an opportunity for Walter to prove himself to Goliath. Fortunately, although the flood had swept through more than half of the territory of Saya, most of the areas in the east were deserts and jungles. Only one area was the heaviest blow. The town of Duk was gone, and the miners, who had been able to mine parangons for generations, had completely disappeared. This was an irreparable loss for the city and the entire kingdom. But for others, it had nothing to do with them, and the losses were not great. There were not too many people who really needed relief and comfort. Even so, Walter was still very busy. Morton, the financial officer, was quite dissatisfied with Walter's carefree attitude. He once complained in private that the high and mighty mages had no concept of money. Obviously, he was talking about Walter. No one knew if he was complaining that Walter spent too much money, or that he was too meticulous in supervising the funds. But Morton only complained a little. He dared not publicly accuse Walter of anything. It was much more painful than working with Cosman. Gollier didn't care about these things at all. It was as if he had disappeared. He hid in the temple and didn't show up again. He didn't ask about anything. Even the routine rituals were presided over by Waret. If it had been someone else, he might have been seen as disloyal and disrespectful to the gods. But in Saya, no one would say anything bad about Goliath. It was not until 3 months later that Goliath officially showed up at a public sacrificial ceremony and symbolically performed his duties. His face was pale and the wrinkles on his forehead were deeper, but his eyes were clearer and deeper than before. At this time, Raphael had returned from the capital. The post-disaster relief work was almost completed. Goliath asked Raphael if he would like to stay in Saya as a high priest. Raphael was very young. He was only a 4th-level mage. Although he did not have any official position, his status was not that of an ordinary noble. He was the son of the former prime minister of the Hittite kingdom. His family was very powerful. If he wanted to enter politics, he would have a bright future in the capital. But the young man was indifferent. Perhaps because he grew up in such a family, he was used to all kinds of conspiracies and fights, and was tired of it. So he was not interested in politics and was only obsessed with magic. Because of his family status, he was able to find a supreme mage like Goliath as his mentor, and became the youngest disciple of the founder of the Hittite Academy of Magic. Becoming the high priest of the city of Saya, in the eyes of others, was a rare opportunity for a meteoric rise, but it was not what Raphael wanted. When Goliath made this suggestion, Raphael did not want to agree, but he did not want to disrespect his mentor, so he hesitated. Goliath saw it and said with a smile, "You are my youngest disciple. Among all my students, you are also the only one I have personally taught since the first awakening of power. I know your temper very well. You are not interested in power, and you also want to use magic to escape from the competition in the family. But people have to do something to live in this world. Magic is not just an illusory achievement. Moreover, if you want to practice magic to the highest level, you must experience all kinds of hardships in the world. Otherwise, there are too many things that you cannot understand. Now Saya needs a high priest, and you also need to be tempered in the world. Like Walter, you also need to help the city deal with everything after the flood." Since his teacher had said so, Raphael nodded and agreed. A mere 4th-level mage was appointed as the high priest of Saya City. It seemed that he was not qualified enough. But when Goliath sent the report to the capital to recommend both Walter and Raphael, it was immediately approved without any questions or discussions. Obviously, Raphael's family played an important role. Walter and Raphael took over the positions of Cosman and Jeremiah. The first thing Goliath asked Raphael to do was to go deep into the muddy swamps and the wilderness where the flood had not yet receded. He had to investigate and collect all the information, including the changes in the terrain. He had to use magic artifacts to record all the information without leaving anything out, and then hand it all to Goliath. This was a very difficult and dangerous job. He had to go deep into the desolate and dangerous areas. After the flood, it was muddy everywhere. There were landslides and mudslides everywhere, and there were frightened beasts that had survived the disaster. Goliath took out a batch of magic artifacts and scrolls and gave them to Raphael, so that he could protect himself in times of crisis. Raphael needed to be tempered, but he couldn't let anything happen to him. It was a difficult task for a 4th-level mage to complete alone. For months later, Raphael came back. His boots were broken and his clothes were torn. Except for a few high-level air magic scrolls that could be used to fly, he had hardly touched anything else. He was going to return them to his teacher. Goliath shook his head and said, "I am very pleased with your behavior. You have exceeded my expectations. Keep these magic artifacts. They may come in handy in the future. I plan to return to the Academy of Magic in the capital next month. I may not be back for a long time. I will leave this place to you." Goliath took away all the information that Raphael had recorded with magic, and then shut himself in. For a whole month, the people of Saya did not see this chief priest. He was doing something very special. Goliath recorded all the information into the Taraculus on his staff, and then activated it with magic. A scene of light and shadow appeared in the void in front of him. It was a panorama of the terrain of Saya that had been submerged by the flood. At first glance, the terrain in the light and shadow looked like a military sand table used by generals in battle. However, it was not a real object but a message from magic. It was detailed and clear, and every part could be enlarged individually. Even the wind in the sky and the airflow in the mountains were recorded with magic. The water in the river was also flowing. Goliath did the same thing with his staff every day. If someone was watching, they would find that the magic message was changing every day, like the natural evolution of rivers and mountains, but much faster than the real dynamics of the outside world. Goliath was performing a special kind of magic, the legendary Great Prophecy. Prophecy was the pinnacle of detection magic and information magic. It was not a supreme magic, which was said to only be mastered by the gods. In fact, an ordinary advanced mage could use it, but it did not make much sense. Either the mage did not have enough magic power to support the continuous consumption, or the result of the prophecy was far from the truth. The basis of performing prophecy was to collect as much detailed information as possible about the things to be prophesied. Then, under certain conditions, one could predict the future of the things to be prophesied in a very intuitive way. The high priest Keystone, who had abandoned his post in the face of danger, also used prophecy when the flood came, but it turned out that his prophecy was wrong. Based on the flood's momentum and the state of Saya, the city would definitely be submerged and destroyed. Keystone had expected this, so he fled. But he did not expect Goliath to kill him so decisively and save the city of Saya. After all, a person's knowledge was limited. It was impossible to predict the interference of all the unknown information. Although an advanced mage could perform prophecy, the real great prophecy was not something that ordinary mages could master. Not even supreme mages could master it. It needed to separate a relatively independent model from all kinds of complicated and changing information, which required a high degree of integration and selection of information detection. It was said that only a level 9 archmage could perform part of the magic of the greater prophecy. Great prophecy seemed magical, but its principle was simple and clear. For example, the most accurate prophecy was that all mortals would die. Today, the 8th level mage Goliath used great prophecy, but the possibility of his prediction being affected by other factors was relatively small. The only problem was that the amount of information needed to be collected was huge, and it consumed a lot of magic power. It also took a long time. Goliath had almost exhausted all his magic power. After 3 months of recuperation, he had fully recovered. He felt that his magic power had increased significantly after this arduous struggle. Goliath spent a whole month in the secret chamber under the cover of the magic circle. Finally, he came to the conclusion that the geographical environment and climate around Duk would change after the flood. He finally understood why Enril said that the flood was a gift from the gods. The most direct impact of the flood was that the land transportation between the Hittite kingdom and the empire of Igut and the kingdom of Babylon was temporarily cut off. The northern part of the Saya desert had become a muddy swamp. Vehicles and caravans could not pass through it. For the time being, goods and trade between Hittite and the empire of Igut could only be transported by sea. This process could last for 1 to 2 years. The economy of Saya might be affected, but on the other hand, it was absolutely safe militarily during this period. It was originally located on the land border between Hittite and Babylon. If the enemy launched a war from the sea, Saya would be the last to be affected. It would no longer be a significant factor in the outcome of the war. The impact of the flood on the economy could be made up for many times, because the land around Duk and the climate of the river basin would be completely changed. The flood formed a large swamp in the low-lying areas. A tributary of the Euphrates River was cut off and flowed southwest through the charcoal forest, forming a huge inland lake in the low-lying areas of the northern part of the Saya Desert. A large amount of silt had filled up the lower parts of the charcoal forest, forming a fertile soil layer. The northern part of the Saya Desert had also become a large grassland. Most importantly, this change was not short-term. Because of the great impact of the flood on the topography, the local climate would fundamentally change. Due to the temperature difference and the evaporative updrafts, the annual precipitation would increase from the charcoal forest to the edge of the Euphrates River Valley. This formed a stable cycle. Coupled with the irrigation provided by the new rivers, there would be a fertile land hundreds of miles from east to west and thousands of miles from north to south, with the disappearing town of Duk as the center. It had hills, mountains, plains, lakes, grasslands suitable for farming and grazing. It was suitable for a large number of people to live in. Originally, there was only the town of Duk, barely enough to ensure the basic livelihood of a mere 2,000 people. Although the miners of Duk were gone, the mines were still there. At the foot of the mountains to the north of the fertile land, there were still rich deposits of refined iron and parangons, the most valuable resources on the continent. There was no need to mention the mining of iron ores. Just the mining of God's stone alone would make this fertile land a battleground for all nations. Every country on the continent had decrees that slaves were not allowed to touch parangons. However, the last step of extracting the parangons from the ore core required a power similar to magic, which was usually done by low-level mages. However, the original geographical environment of Duk was too desolate and remote, and the living conditions were too harsh. It did not have the conditions to become a prosperous city, so the miners of Duk had always existed. Now the situation had changed. Hundreds of thousands of people could live in that area. If someone good at management was in charge of it, it could even accommodate millions of people for a long time and build homes. If this really happened, it meant that a powerful new country could be established on the continent, although its territory did not seem to be too large. However, the possibility of establishing a new country was very small, because the surrounding countries would not give up on this strategically and economically important fertile land. In the foreseeable future, wars would erupt here for many years. The blood of countless people would flow, and it was unknown how many lives would be buried. Most of this uninhabited land was currently within the territory of the Hittite kingdom, under the jurisdiction of Saya. But its geographical position was very special. It was an enclave, inserted right into the center of the continent. Chapter 48. Please tempt me after the flood. The charcoal marsh would be formed to the west of the land, and it would be impossible for a large army to pass through. The Hittite army could only go south into the Saya Desert, then turn northeast to reach there from the edge of the newly formed inland lake. To the north of it was the Assyrian plateau, and the Assyrian army had to cross the plateau if they wanted to get there. To the east of the Saya Valley, the steep mountains and forests were a natural barrier. Beyond the inland lake, the area to the south was still a desert. If the armies of Babylon and Igut wanted to enter the Saya Desert, they could only cross the desert from the east and the west, and then head north. There were natural geographical barriers between this area and the surrounding countries, as well as difficult expeditionary supply lines. Therefore, once a war was launched, the consumption and casualties would be especially high. If someone was the first to occupy this place, build a city and manor, and have a military and economic supply base, they would have a clear advantage. Anyone with a discerning eye could see this. Because of this, a great war between the countries was inevitable, and the fertile land would be filled with blood and smoke. The flood was Enlil's so-called gift. A new fertile land had appeared on the continent, and it could have become a prosperous and peaceful home for the people. But Goliath seemed to see another disaster coming. And this disaster was also the result of people's own choices. Although Goliath could foresee it, he could not stop it. Goliath even analyzed the military strategic situation. Originally, the Assyrian kingdom did not pose much of a threat to the Hittite border, because their army had to cross the Saya Plateau, and the cost of starting a war was too high. But after the situation changed, people would be willing to pay the price if there was enough profit. From a military point of view, Assyria was the most advantageous in the war, but it was the weakest country. From a war supply line point of view, the Hittite kingdom was naturally the most advantageous. After all, the fertile land where the town of Duk was located was closest to Saya. But from a power point of view, the empire of Igut in the southwest was the strongest. In the southeast, Babylon was as powerful as Hittite, and its supply line was not very long. They only needed to cross the Saya Desert from the lower reaches of the Euphrates River. Every country had its advantages and disadvantages, and it seemed that no one had the absolute upper hand. Goliath could only analyze the situation based on his experience. He couldn't use greater prophecy to come to a conclusion. Even if the two kingdoms of Assyria and Babylon were not considered, war between Hittite and the empire of Igut was bound to break out again in the foreseeable future. The powerful empire of Igut had forced the Hittite kingdom to submit decades ago. However, it was precisely because the Hittite kingdom was too far away from the Hittite kingdom that Igut was unable to incorporate the Hittite kingdom into his territory. In order to weaken the conflict and achieve the most favorable rule, the pharaohs of Igut allowed the Hittite kingdom to keep the original temples, but they had to build the temples of Horus and pay the tributes of the vassal state. Nowadays, many people in the Hittite kingdom were dissatisfied with the fate of submission for decades. Some people had been accumulating strength in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to rebel. The last time Governor Shmuel ambushed Rod-Dick's caravan in an attempt to seize the god's tear, it was for this reason. For the empire of Igut, The reason why it was unable to annex the Hittite kingdom was that it was separated by the sea and the desert. It was difficult to thoroughly govern the area in the form of local governance. But now that there was a vast, uninhabited fertile land, the situation was different. Occupying the land for immigration was not only to expand the territory, but also to serve as an important strategic and economic base to deter other countries. There must be people in the upper echelons of the Empire of Igut who knew that the resistance of the Hittite kingdom was growing day by day. The geographical conditions had suddenly changed. The best strategic choice was to take the initiative and send an expeditionary force to occupy the fertile land around the town of Duk and extend the territory to this place. Goliath's series of analysis and conclusions would still take time to see. The geographical and climatic changes he had predicted with the Great Prophecy would really stabilize and form the fertile land in 3 to 5 years. At present, there would not be any disputes in the next 1 to 2 years. The area around the town of Duk would still be a muddy, uninhabited swamp. A month later, Goliath walked out of the secret chamber. He looked even more tired than when the flood receded. But he did not have time to rest. He summoned his students, Walter, Raphael, and the governor, Shmuel, to the shrine and had a long, private talk with them. No one else knew what Goliath said. Then Goliath left Saya and returned to the Hittite Academy of Magic in the capital. For a year, he did not come out of his room and did not ask about anything. In the past, Goliath often returned to the capital. He still had a title in the Academy of Magic, but every once in a while he would return to Saya to deal with the affairs of the shrine. In the Academy of Magic he also did various research and teaching work. But this time, it was completely different. Goliath did not pay any attention to anything in the shrine of Saya. He almost never appeared in public in the Hittite Academy. He claimed that he was going to study complex magic and closed the door to visitors. His prestige in Saya was unparalleled, but doing so in the capital inevitably aroused criticism. Many people used various channels to impeach Goliath, criticizing the supreme mage for not being loyal to his duty. Some people suggested that another mage should be sent to replace Goliath as the chief priest of the shrine of Saya. Instead, he should be given an empty title in the Academy of Magic to study magic. The chief priest of the Academy of Magic visited and persuaded Goliath, but the result was unknown. The king of Hittite, Wuxia, sent a messenger to Goliath, but the result was also unknown. It was always prudent to deal with a supreme mage. Even the king was hesitant for some reason. After a long time, the Hittite Academy of Magic finally decided to remove Goliath from his position in the Shrine of Saya. At this time, Goliath suddenly appeared in the Academy of Magic again. People were surprised to learn that he was already a 9th-level supreme mage. All the voices of doubt immediately disappeared. It turned out that this supreme mage was really concentrating on practicing magic and could not be disturbed by the outside world. He had already broken through to the highest realm, the 9th level, so what was there to care about? The attitude of those who had originally criticized and impeached Goliath changed immediately. One after another, they sent the most valuable gifts to Goliath. Goliath did not mind and accepted them all with a smile. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. King Wuxia of Hittite held a special banquet to congratulate Goliath. Also present were the elders of the Academy of Magic and important ministers of the palace. The king and his ministers talked and laughed happily. After the banquet, the king summoned Goliath alone for a long talk. People speculated that the king might want to keep Goliath in the capital to take up a more important position, such as the high priest of the main shrine of Hittite. But this speculation was wrong. The next day, Goliath said goodbye to the crowd and returned to the distant border of Saya to continue serving as the chief priest of Saya. The news that Goliath had become a 9th-level supreme mage after a year of seclusion soon spread to Saya. When Goliath's carriage entered the west gate of Saya, people flooded out of the city to welcome him as if he was a god. Goliath's reputation in the city reached its peak. As expected, Saya, which had been cut off from the neighboring countries, had been peaceful for the past year. It was so peaceful that people felt a little bored. Goliath's return to the city was naturally a cause for celebration, and the people who had been idle for a long time also got excited. Raphael was already a 5th-level mage. The young man's aptitude was already very good, so it was not surprising that he had made such progress. Walter was still a 6th-level mage, and it was extremely difficult to advance from the 6th to the 7th level. Most mages would be stuck at this threshold all their lives. Otherwise, supreme mages would not have such a high status. Governor Schmull finally breathed a sigh of relief. For the past year, the whole city had lived a very leisurely and peaceful life. Only the governor was secretly very nervous, but no one knew what he was nervous about. It seemed that he wanted Goliath to come back more than anyone else. This was somewhat strange, because in Goliath's absence, Schmull was the most distinguished lord here and held all the real power. It was more advantageous to his position if Goliath did not return. On the same day that Goliath solemnly returned to Saya, on the plateau of the Euphrates River in the distance, Amon quietly left the caveman's tribe and embarked on a long journey alone. Why would Amon leave at this time? It all started from a few months ago. Since 3 months ago, Amon had felt a great deal of pressure when practicing body arts. Once he used the power of his blood beyond a certain limit, he felt as if there was a small mountain pressing down on him, and all the joints in his body were creaking, as if some kind of magic had been cast on him to restrict and hinder his movements. Similar phenomena were encountered by all warriors before they advanced to the advanced level. It took great perseverance to persevere in training to make a breakthrough. Some people really couldn't bear it, and naturally, their body arts could not advance. Some people persisted in training, but they could never make a breakthrough. Not everyone could become an advanced warrior. But Amon was very clear that the test of blood purity had come. He had finally practiced body arts to the peak. He had previously experienced the test of body purity, which was to restore his body to a state of natural health without any hidden injuries. But now, with the training of body arts, his body had also been improved to adapt to the growth of strength. This test would eliminate many people who did not have enough hard work, or were born with insufficient physical strength. Amon was used to hardships since he was a child. He began to learn the mining skills of Duk at the age of 12. It was definitely hard work, and he had to endure the bone-chilling cold spring every night. So he didn't feel too uncomfortable, and he had never stopped practicing body arts. He was just a little surprised. He had broken through from the 1st level to the 3rd level very quickly. He thought that it wouldn't take long for him to face the next test, but it took him more than a year. In fact, it was fast enough. He seemed to have forgotten that he was only 15 years old, the period of puberty. In theory, this was the golden age to advance to the advanced level. The body's development would synchronize with the improvement of physical strength to achieve the best results. But in fact, it was too difficult. For example, Madanzo, who had been practicing body art since he was a child, also advanced to the 4th level in his early 20s. Amon used to practice the power of 2 sides. He could break through from the 1st level to the 3rd level so quickly, because he had a good foundation. But from the lower level to the middle level, this was a more difficult threshold. His speed was already amazing. It took Amon 3 months to get rid of the trouble of the internal restraints in his body. He felt so light and comfortable all over. There seemed to be a power flowing in his blood that could be activated at will, and it could even be condensed outside of his body. If this power was strong enough, it could even resist many magic arts. This meant that Amon had become an advanced warrior of the 4th level. The process of the test was very long, but passing it was very sudden. One day, when he was practicing body arts, the entangled pressure in his body disappeared inexplicably. Amon felt a wave of relief, as if he had been freed from life. He wielded the staff as if it were an iron rod. The heavy staff seemed to be as light as a real tree branch. He operated the power that seemed to flow in his body and shot it out. The tip of the staff emitted a faint layer of light. It was as heavy as a small mountain, and then it fell gently like a feather. Amon was not proficient in many martial arts. He still used the method of mining cores. The staff touched a rock, and there was almost no sound. The hard rock immediately turned into countless pieces. Amon couldn't help but think, wouldn't it be much easier to mine parangons if I could control this power? He still lacked enough experience, and the only analogy he could think of was the experience he had in the past. On the same night that he passed the test, Amon sat quietly in his room, and took out the taroculus. He did not rush to read the information inside. Instead, he waved his hand in the air, and a circle of fire appeared around him. This was the advanced wall of fire he had already mastered. The wall of fire danced around him. Suddenly, Amon naughtily snapped his fingers, and the shape of the wall of fire changed. It became a circle of fire fence around him. Amon waved his hand again, and the top of the fence extended inward. The fire became a huge birdcage, trapping him in the middle. Amon thought it was funny and laughed in the dark. This was spatial magic. There was no such thing as a low-level spatial magic. Spatial magic started at the intermediate level. To be able to use two kinds of advanced magic at the same time was already the basic standard for a fourth-level mage. Moreover, Amon did not use his staff at all. Amon was very satisfied with this magic game. He nodded to himself and put away the fire cage. Then he activated the taroculus. As expected, the message left by Crazy Ol appeared in front of him again. My child, maybe I should congratulate you. When you read this message, you will already be a fourth-level mage. I don't know if you have found Bear's whereabouts. If you can't, I have a suggestion for you. You can become a sorcerer and hide your identity as a warrior. There is more than one way to unravel the secrets of the gods. You can refer to what Bear did in the past. I think that the new adoratress of the Temple of Isis, Maria, is very congenial to you. When you become a supreme sorcerer, you can find a chance to have a deeper conversation with her. I have high hopes for you. You can definitely do better than Bear. Crazy Ol's tone was sarcastic, as if he was serious and joking at the same time, just like his usual frivolous self. In the next message, there were some introductions to advanced magic. There wasn't much content because many advanced magic had already been introduced before. In addition to the advanced magic, there was also new information about how to make magic artifacts, such as making staffs and writing scrolls. Writing scrolls must be in hieroglyphs, so the message also introduced the specific forms of writing, and how to interpret them. Crazy Ol's voice ended. I am not only an 8th level mage, but also one of the best craftsmen on the continent. Otherwise, I would not have been able to make your staff. It was not made in a few days. The iron embryo in your house, I have secretly worked on it many times over the years. I finally made it into a staff and gave it to you before you left. Learning to make these magic artifacts may be very useful to you, but remember, these are skills that rely on external objects, not the practice of magic itself. You can use them at the critical moment, but you should not be obsessed with them and deviate from the fundamental direction. There was once a supreme mage named Nero. He reached the 7th level in his early 20s, and was regarded as a genius in magic. But he was obsessed with making scrolls and became the best scroll maker in the whole of Igut. But he never reached the 8th level for more than 40 years. 30 years ago, he disappeared while hunting Bear. I think he could have become a 9th level mage. You must remember this lesson. Crazy Ol predicted the coming disaster and arranged the path that Amon had to take in the future, but he was not an all-rounder. He was not sure if Amon could find Bear. The message in the taroculus was already a backup reminder. If Amon could not find Bear, he could still follow the instructions in the taroculus and become a supreme sorcerer step by step like Bear. Crazy Ol taught Amon how to write the script at the most appropriate stage, but he did not know that Amon had already learned it from Bear's message. He also told Amon about Nero's deeds, but he did not expect that Nero's relics also fell into Amon's hands. Only now did Amon realize that the owner of the staff and the ring was such a famous scroll maker. Amon, who was playing naughtily a moment ago, sighed sadly. He put away the taroculus and knelt on the ground. He bowed in the direction of Duk in the west and kissed the soil. Although it was not the soil of Duk, it was still the same land. He had decided to leave. He would continue to practice the 4th level magic and body arts in his travels, and then face the next test. He would wait for the devil's temptation, in the unknown world beyond the mountains. Link was meditating when he heard a voice in his mind. Come to the big cave. Please do not disturb the people. I will wait for you there. This was Amon's message magic calling. He hurriedly got up, picked up the bone club out of habit, and quietly ran out of the house. When he came to the big cave, Amon was already waiting for him. He was standing behind the fire, facing the stone wall. Link hurriedly asked, Ammonius, why did you summon me here in the middle of the night? Amon turned around and handed him a dark yellow staff with 7 parangons inlaid in a spiral arrangement. He smiled and said, You have become a 3rd-level sorcerer 2 months ago, and your body arts have also reached the 3rd level. I have promised to give you a real staff. What do you think? Are you satisfied with this staff? Duke's Pivot is finally on the shelves. Please subscribe. Please get monthly tickets. Thank you. In this chapter, Goliath's analysis of the situation of various countries can be read more clearly and intuitively with the map of the continent in the first chapter. Introduction of the characters in this chapter. Chapter 49. You are my only god. Whenever Link was shocked, he had a habit of opening his mouth so wide that he could swallow a fist. At this moment, he even forgot to open his mouth. Looking at the staff in Amon's hand, his face suddenly turned red and his hair stood up. His nose hummed for a long time, but he couldn't say a complete sentence. Amon walked over and put the staff in his hand. Only then did Link react. He knelt on the ground and saluted. Amon, I'm not dreaming, am I? When Amon gave Madanzo a parangan, Link was so envious that he almost drooled. He didn't expect that this staff was inlaid with 7 parangons. He was now a 3rd-level mage. Of course, he knew that a staff with 7 parangons inlaid with 7 parangons was much more valuable than a parangan. Money was secondary. In this caveman tribe, there was no need to spend money. Such a thing was something that a small tribe leader like him could only dream of. When he saw the staff, he couldn't believe his eyes. While saluting Amon, he rubbed his eyes and touched the staff in his hand. He heard Amon say with a smile, I promised you. I should have given it to you 2 months ago. Link looked at the staff with great care and swallowed. But it's too valuable. How can I accept it? You should keep it for yourself. Amon smiled and waved his hand. Things always have their uses. A miner can't use several sledgehammers at the same time. You lack a real staff, but I have other staffs. I have been here for almost 2 years. For such a long time, you have entertained me and my cat with good wine and food. All the people worship me as a god. I don't think yesterday's gratitude is enough. Link hurriedly shook his head and said, No, no, no. How can you say that? Even if we sell all the good things in our tribe, I'm afraid it won't be worth half a staff. Since you have other staffs, then I will accept them for the time being. Thank you, Ammonius. Amon said, Get up and talk. The staff is yours. Put it away. This staff has no difference in attributes, and it can amplify the effects of all kinds of magic. Moreover, its casting speed is very fast, much better than that bone staff of yours. But be careful. Don't use the staff when you practice magic power. Only use it to help you master magic skills. Link excitedly nodded and said, I'll remember. You also said before that I shouldn't use my patriarch's scepter when I practice my strength. Actually, I don't think it's the same whether I use it or not. But with this staff, it's different. I'll definitely pay attention in the future. Madanzo hasn't been here for a long time. He's probably practicing his magic behind closed doors at home. If he saw this staff, I wonder how envious he would be. Amon coughed and said, Link, this staff is for you to practice and cast magic, not for you to show off. You were envious of Madanzo, and now you want Madanzo to be envious of you. If that's the case, I'd rather not give you anything. Link was taken aback and quickly replied solemnly, I will remember your reminder. I will only cherish it and not show off. Then he carefully held the staff in his arms. Amon suddenly stretched out his hand and took out a crescent moon-shaped axe out of thin air. It shone with a silver luster under the firelight. He also handed it to Link and said, I'll give you another weapon. In this deep forest, an axe should be the best. You're not only a mage but also a 3rd-level warrior. You should have a decent weapon. Link took the axe. He was so touched that tears almost fell from his eyes. He didn't know what to say. Amon didn't seem to want to waste time. He waved his hand and said, Sit down. I'm going to teach you something new today. I'll only say it once. Remember it well. Amon taught Link all kinds of advanced magic, the same as what he had just learned from the Taraculus. Amon didn't hold anything back. He even taught Link how to make all kinds of magic artifacts. Link had been learning to write for more than a year. Amon also taught him hieroglyphs, which saved him the trouble of learning them again. Not only that, he even taught Link mid-level body arts. However, Amon himself was not an expert in martial arts, so he only taught Link the most basic body arts training methods, mainly to strengthen the body and the power in the bloodline. Finally, he said solemnly, "Link, I've awakened the power of two sides for you. It's different from other training methods. You're not only a warrior, but also a mage. I think you know what a mage is, right?" Link smiled. "Of course I know. But in my tribe there's no such thing. You're a god, Amon." Amon tried his best to keep a straight face. "Of course it doesn't matter here. No one will blame you for practicing magic. But if one day you go out of the mountains, you can't easily reveal your identity. So I remind you not to show off that staff. The purpose of learning magic is to master the magic, not to show off." Link shook his head and nodded. His head was like a blade of grass in a whirlwind. He quickly nodded again. "I'll remember. Amon, what else do you want me to do?" Amon's expression became serious. He said very seriously, "The most important thing is that you can only practice magic the way I teach you." Of course, there was a reason why he said this. Bear summed up the path to become a god. Regardless of body arts or magic, one had to pass all kinds of tests in order. That was how Amon taught Link. He also hoped that Link would follow this path and not make any mistakes. Crazy, Ol once lamented that if one started on the wrong path, the further one went, the harder it would be to return to the right path. Amon could not explain the reason to Link. These were his secrets. But Link did not ask. He also raised his staff solemnly and swore, "Amon, you are my only god." It was interesting, but looking at Link's serious expression, Amon was a little stunned. He wanted to laugh, but in the end he nodded seriously and said, "You can understand it that way. It will help you to strengthen your faith. I'm leaving tonight. I hope you practice hard and take good care of your people." Link was surprised. He stepped forward and asked with his eyes wide open, "What, you're leaving?" Amon nodded sadly. "Yes, it's time. I should go. I can't stay here forever. I have my own path to explore." "Where are you going?" Link asked. "I'm going to travel the continent. My first stop is the Kingdom of Babylon, to see Medanzo," Amon said. He had never traveled far. Although he planned to travel the continent, the only place he could think of was Medanzo. He would go there first. Link said reluctantly, "I also want to travel with you and see the world outside the mountains. But I'm the patriarch, and I need to protect my people. In the future, when I choose a qualified patriarch, I can go outside the mountains. But where can I find you?" "Let's talk about the future in the future. I don't even know where I'm going," Amon said. "You can wait for me here. If you really want to go outside the mountains, you can also go find Medanzo. But be careful when you go out." Link grabbed Amon's sleeve. "You must be careful too." After saying this, he felt that his worry was a little unnecessary. Amon was almost omnipotent like a god. What was there to worry about? After thinking for a moment, he added, "Ammonius, there are many bad people outside the mountains. You must be careful of them." Amon patted Link on the shoulder. "Thank you for reminding me. I know. I've seen bad people." His body had grown very fast in the past year. His height was no different from that of a healthy adult. His body did not look particularly strong, but it was very well proportioned and fit. Unknowingly, he was already half a head taller than Link. The clothes he wore when he first came could no longer be worn. At this moment, he was wearing a leather robe made by the most skillful girl in the caveman tribe. Inside was a linen undershirt, and on his feet was a pair of finely woven straw sandals. The 2 leather bags given to him by Crazy Ol looked ordinary, but they were very strong and durable. There was no sign of wear at all. Amon slung the big bag over his shoulder and put the small bag in his arms. Carrying his iron stick, he left the village under the cover of the night. Schrödinger was still sleeping. Amon took it out of the grass and put it in the bag. For more than a year, Schrödinger had been very depressed. Amon never heard it call out again, nor did he write a word of hieroglyphs. He had tried many times to communicate with the cat, coaxing it to talk softly, but Schrödinger was too lazy to respond. Link was the only one who escorted Amon to the outskirts of the village. He walked Amon for a long distance, reluctant to go back. In the end, Amon stopped and said, "You should go back. You can't keep walking like this. Go back from here." Link's eyes were red. He said pitifully, "Ammonius, don't forget me. This year is really like a dream, an incredible dream." Amon was also very reluctant. He had lived here for nearly 2 years. Not only did the tribesmen worship him as a god, but they also treated him with the highest courtesy and the best enjoyment the tribe could provide. Moreover, they were all his friends. At this moment, there was a sudden sound in the bushes on the side of the road. The king ironback came out with 4 other big ironbacks, looking at Amon and whining in a low voice. Amon turned and said, "Have you come to see me off too? Protect the people here, especially you, King of Beasts. I will give you a name, Elmarch. Elmar, I know you can practice magic. I will come back to see you." The king ironback could now understand Amon's words. It lay on the ground and kept nodding. At this time, Schrödinger suddenly jumped out of the bag and looked at the distant mountains. No one knew what it was thinking. Only Amon knew that it was looking in the direction of the mountain that it had been to before, even though it couldn't be seen from here. "Schrödinger, we should go," Amon called. But Schrödinger didn't seem to hear it. It was still looking into the distance. For the past year or so, it always had this reaction when Amon spoke. Amon asked helplessly, "Do you want to stay here or go with me? To be honest, I really hate to leave you, but if you like it here more, then stay." Schrödinger seemed to hesitate for a moment, but soon made a decision. It jumped back into Amon's bag and went back to sleep. Amon didn't know if it was asleep or not. It was very dangerous to cross the mountains at night, but for an advanced mage like Amon who had mastered detection magic, he could sense everything clearly. There was no difference between night and day. Unless all the beasts in the mountains were as incredible as Schrödinger, he didn't need to care. An advanced mage had a high status in any city-state on the continent, but Amon, a sorcerer who lived in seclusion in the mountains, didn't understand their habits at all. He didn't learn either good or bad habits. He walked a completely different path. For example, a noble mage would not take the risk of trekking through the mountains at night, pointlessly wasting precious magic power to cast detection magic overnight, and without the use of a staff. In the eyes of many mages, this behavior was as inconceivable as that of Schrödinger in Amon's eyes. Amon had to cross the mountains to reach the lower reaches of the Euphrates River, which was the border between the desert and the river valley, and also the border between Hittite and Babylon. Then he would cross the Euphrates River at a place where the water was broad and gentle, and then he would continue on his way to Babylon city. It was a long road. It took Amon half a month to see a village. They were not cavemen, but residents of the border of Babylon. Amon's straw sandals were worn out, so he put on another pair that Link had prepared for him. In the caveman's village, only he and Link wore sandals. They traveled day and night, regardless of whether it was day or night, sunny or rainy. When they felt tired, they would sit down and rest to restore their strength and magic power, then continue on their way. He had brought enough food with him, including all kinds of delicious meat floss that could be kept for a long time, dehydrated wild vegetables and green beans. All of them were stored in the strange space of the bone. Every evening, Amon would stop to make a pot of delicious meat and vegetable soup for Schrödinger. He knew that Schrödinger was used to having meals at this time. Schrödinger was always listless, but he would always finish the soup. Half a month later, when Amon had almost reached the edge of the mountains, he suddenly realized that he might have made a mistake. Along the way, he not only avoided the beasts in the mountains, but also avoided other cavemen's tribes. These days, whenever he saw a populated place, he would subconsciously avoid it. So far, he hadn't come into contact with a single person. He was not running away, but traveling across the continent. His real purpose was not to find Madanzo. He came out of the mountains to experience more things in the world. Thinking of this, Amon changed his direction. Instead of walking in the wilderness, He went to the Euphrates River, where there were people. Strangely enough, yesterday they had encountered several villages. Aman had deliberately bypassed them, but today he wanted to find a place with people, but he didn't see anyone after walking for a whole night. At dawn, he heard the sound of running water. After climbing over a mountain, he came to the running Euphrates River. In front of him were grasslands and undulating hills. In the distance he could see sheep grazing, like white clouds floating in the green fields. Finally out of the mountains, Aman spread his arms and took a deep breath. The bright scenery in front of him made him feel much better. Just then, he suddenly heard a woman crying not far away. The sound made him curious. He had always wanted to find a place with people, so he was naturally happy to hear someone's voice. But why was the woman crying so sadly? Schrödinger poked his head out of the leather bag and turned his ears. Surprisingly, he frowned like a human, as if he was puzzled. Then he retracted his head and closed the bag with his paw. Maybe it was because of the noise or because he didn't want people to see him. After crossing a grassy slope, Aman finally saw a young girl wearing a coarse linen skirt and a pair of straw sandals. She was sitting there crying with her hands over her face. Her shoulders were still shaking uncontrollably. "Why are you crying so sadly? What happened? Can I help you?" asked Aman, standing on the grassy slope. The girl was startled by his voice. She stood up and took a few steps back. She asked in a panic, "Who are you? Why don't I know you? Why did you suddenly appear in this place?" Aman did look a little strange. The weather was very hot, but he was still covered with animal skin. He was holding a long branch that looked like an old man's crutch, but he looked like a young man. Aman was also secretly surprised. He swore that he didn't know this girl, but he inexplicably felt that she was familiar. He must have seen her somewhere before, but it was impossible for him to have seen her before. Seeing that the girl seemed to be afraid, he hurriedly explained, "I am a hunter in the mountains. I lost my way while looking for prey. I don't know how I got here. Can you tell me how to get to the nearest town? If you are in any trouble, I can try my best to help you." The girl took another step back. She subconsciously crossed her arms in front of her chest and wrapped her skirt tightly. She lowered her head and answered shyly in panic, You, why are you looking at me like that?" Aman inexplicably felt that she looked familiar, but it was strange that he didn't know this person at all. She was the first person he had seen in half a month, so it was inevitable that he would carefully look her up and down. His eyes were always fixed on the girl. As a young man, this seemed to be very impolite or had some other meaning. The girl stood up and revealed her face. Only then did Aman realize that she was very beautiful. Whether it was her facial features or her figure, there was an indescribable shyness to her. Although she was wearing a shabby skirt, her skin was very soft. The weather was relatively hot, so her clothes were slightly loose but very thin. Her arms and calves were exposed, and her skin was moist and indescribably attractive. Looking at her gentle rise and fall, it was almost impeccable. There was a youthful vitality with an aura of maturity. She subconsciously crossed her arms in front of her chest, causing her skirt to tighten. Her breasts were very plump, and the neckline was pushed up, revealing a sexy cleavage. Her expression and tone were not so much questioning, but rather another kind of seduction and temptation. Unfortunately, Aman had no experience in this aspect, so he didn't even have any reaction. He only realized that it was impolite to stare at her like that. He hurriedly explained, "You are the first person I have met in half a month, and you look very familiar. I was curious when I heard you crying just now, so I came to ask. This is the wilderness. Why are you alone? What happened to you?" The girl seemed to be very curious as well. She raised her bright eyes and looked at him, whispering, "My name is Yun Namna, a shepherdess of the Euphrates River. My sheep was lost, and I can't find it anymore. When I go back, I will definitely be punished, and what awaits me is the master's whip." So I cried sadly, "Good hunter, what's your name? Can you help me find my lost sheep?" Chapter 50. The woman at the foot of the mountain. Yun Namna's voice was very pleasant, as if it was a voice that Aman had never heard before. Her voice was graceful, as if she was singing. Aman felt very comfortable. He nodded and replied, "Don't worry. If it hasn't gone far, we should be able to find it." "Where did you lose it?" Yunamna pointed in the direction where Aman came from. "Over there." It was a hill by the Euphrates River, close to the dense forest. Aman frowned slightly. If the sheep had gone into the forest, it would indeed be difficult to find it. Besides, there were also wild beasts in the forest. The sheep might have been taken away by the beasts. He thought for a moment and decided to help. He nodded and said, "Wait here, I'll help you find it." Aman was a straightforward man. He turned around and walked back the way he came. Yunamna shouted from behind, "Handsome hunter, please wait, I'll go with you. You don't know my sheep." She lifted the hem of her dress and trotted to catch up with Aman. Aman slowed down and followed her back to the forest at the foot of the mountain. It was too difficult to find a lost sheep in the wild. Aman agreed to help because he knew detection magic. It was a magic that could be cast in front of ordinary people, without leaving any trace. Aman walked through the forest with the girl, quietly casting detection magic to search around. He did find a lot of animals, including 2 sheep, but they were wild sheep in the mountain. This kind of large-scale detection magic was extremely taxing on magic power. Most advanced mages wouldn't be able to bear it. Aman grew tired before he knew it. Yunamna said that she was looking for sheep, but she didn't look around. She only looked at Aman with her big beautiful eyes. Her expression was shy and charming. She seemed to be very interested in the young hunter. Aman had searched the whole mountain. Across the valley was the steep forest. Suddenly he heard a cry of surprise from the girl behind him, accompanied by the sound of cloth being torn. She turned around and saw that Inanna's dress had been caught by the thorns on the bushes. When she was walking forward, she accidentally tore her dress. Not only did it reveal her smooth shoulders, but a full breast also jumped out of her torn chest, gently bouncing in the air. The crimson-red flesh was like a ripe fruit that was tempting to be picked, slightly trembling with the rise and fall of her chest. Aman had seen women's breasts before. There were many women in the caveman tribe who sometimes didn't wear clothes. But this was the first time he had seen such a seductive chest. "Aman, help me." It was only a few thorns that caught her dress, but Yunamna seemed to be frightened. She called out to Aman in a sweet voice. Aman walked quickly towards her. Inexplicably, he felt a little hot. His heart was also beating wildly. The strange feeling he had after taking a bath in the cold spring 2 years ago seemed to have been awakened again. Now Aman was almost 16 years old. His body was far more mature than other children of his age. He looked no different from an adult. He also had natural desires. Aman had long passed the test of desire awakening. But it didn't mean that people were ignorant and desireless stones. The test was only to calm the mind in the state of meditation, so that it wouldn't be affected by the rising desires and could continue to practice magic. But people themselves didn't change. They still did what they usually did. The shepherdess, Yunamna, seemed to be very timid. She cried for the loss of her lamb. Even the thorns on the tree could scare her like this. But on the other hand, she was very bold. She even ran into the woods with a strong man. If anything happened in the wilderness, she wouldn't even be able to call for help. Although Aman's face was red and his heart was beating fast, he didn't have any thoughts. To be honest, he didn't realize that he should have any thoughts. Instead, he didn't want the girl to see that he had lost his composure. When he approached her, he turned his face away and tried not to look at her. He reached out and took the thorns off. He whispered guiltily, "It's just a few thorns. Don't be afraid." The girl thanked him and covered her clothes with her hands. But the torn clothes couldn't hide her bad body. Her movements and breathing were a little flustered. She raised her head and looked at Aman with a red face. She said weakly, "Aman, are you a good person or a bad person?" This action, this posture, this expression, this tone, was clearly a kind of hint and desire. The dense forest was filled with a silent, ambiguous atmosphere. If it was another person who had the slightest evil thought, he would go up and hug her. Then he would press her down in the grass under the tree. Everything that needed to be done would be done. Aman's heart beat faster because of the girl's question. Did she want to say that he was a bad person who took the opportunity to peek at her body, and let his imagination run wild? He took off the leather robe on his upper body and handed it to her. Oh, I almost forgot about your clothes. Put this on first. This mountain has been searched everywhere. If we go any further, it will be deep mountains and dangerous valleys. There's no way to search anymore. The sheep might have been taken away by wild beasts. The girl looked at him with some surprise. She loosened her hands that were covering her chest and put on the leather robe. Suddenly, she sniffled and lay on Amon's shoulder and began to cry again. Poor little lamb, where do you want me to find it? What a tragic fate, poor person. What awaits you is the mouth of the tiger. What awaits me is the whip. Who can save it? Her crying was really more beautiful than singing, like the clear song of a nightingale. When she cried, she leaned on Amon's shoulder. Her hair tickled Amon's ear, and a tempting fragrance went straight into his nose. Amon couldn't help but stretch out a hand to hold her waist. It felt so good. He lowered his head and whispered, What kind of sheep did you lose? Can you buy it nearby? If you can take me to the nearest town, I will give you one. Amon didn't need to spend a penny in the caveman's tribe, and he had nowhere to spend it. So when he left the mountain, he had more money than before, because he found 9 parangons in the strange mountain. In Duk, every caravan would bring a live sheep, which usually sold for 3 to 5 silver coins each, depending on the size of the sheep. If you bought a barrel of wine, the merchants would generously give you an extra lamb. It was impossible to keep a large number of sheep near Duk for a long time, and fresh meat was hard to preserve. So people usually processed the meat into jerky or floss. Crazy Ole's secret meat floss was the best. It was delicious and could be preserved for a long time. Amon had learned how to make meat floss from Crazy Ole when he was a child. Since he started to practice magic, he realized why Crazy Ole's secret meat floss was always better than his own. It was processed with magic. For example, water magic could be used to instantly dehydrate the meat floss, fire magic could be used to instantly dry it, and spatial magic could be used to keep it the same. When cooked, it would be like fresh meat soup. Beans and wild vegetables could also be added. Amon asked Yunnumna to take him to the town, and in return, he would buy her a sheep. While he was talking about buying sheep, he thought of food because he was really hungry. He had walked in the mountains all night, and then used a large-scale detection magic to search the whole mountain. It was almost noon, and the consumption of physical and magical power made people feel hungry. But he wasn't in a hurry to eat. He wanted to finish his business first. He couldn't let Yunnumna cry so pitifully all the time. She was the first person he met when he walked down the mountain. He felt a sense of familiarity with her. Maybe it was because of this feeling that he found her familiar. Yunnumna looked up from Amon's shoulder. Her face was still wet with tears, but she looked pleasantly surprised. She said with a warm breath, Really? You're going to give me a sheep? My sheep is white with black spots and stripes. The town is far from here. It'll take a long time to get there. Amon smiled. In that case, let's go. Can we get there before dark? Yunnumna also smiled. It's not noon yet. We'll get there in the afternoon. The two walked out of the forest. Yunnumna led the way southwest through grassy hills to the nearest town. The blades of grass were knee-high and tickled his calves. From afar, it looked like an undulating carpet of green. From time to time, he could see wildflowers of various colors decorating the ground. The sun was shining brightly and the air was very fresh. There was even a faint fragrance in the air. Perhaps it was the smell of the girl beside him. Her smile was as bright as the sun, and her posture was as gentle as the grass. Amon was in a hurry, but he was afraid Yunnumna would not be able to keep up. Since Yunnumna was obediently leaning against him, Amon put his arm around her waist. This way, the two of them could walk a little faster. Amon did not have any other thoughts. He only felt that this was very comfortable. Taking a leisurely stroll on the undulating grassy hills with a girl in his arms was a beautiful scenery, and a good mood that he had never enjoyed in his life. Just to thank her for being in such a good mood. What's the big deal about buying a sheep? Before they knew it, they had walked a long distance. It was already past noon. Yunnumna's footsteps slowed down. Amon stopped and asked, What's the matter? Are you tired? Yunnumna softly said, Are you hungry? You haven't eaten anything yet. Can you eat something before you leave? She was really considerate. Amon immediately nodded and said, Okay, let's eat something first. He let go of her hand and was about to take out the pot and meat floss when the girl took out 2 pieces of bread from her bosom and said, I only have 2 pieces of bread. I don't know if it's enough for you. Amon waved his hand and said, I also brought food. I don't need to eat your food. Yun Numna's expression showed that she was wronged. She pouted and looked like she was about to cry. I don't have anything else to repay you. I only have these 2 pieces of bread. They are my food for today. Why do you refuse my kindness? Amon quickly replied, Thank you for your kindness, but you should be hungry. How about this, we each eat a piece of bread. I will cook a pot of soup. There is water over there. Let's go and get some soup. Amon accepted her kindness. He ate a piece of bread and invited her to drink his soup. The 2 of them walked forward arm in arm. A clear stream flowed through the middle of 2 grassy hills. Yun Numna said in surprise, Amon, how do you know there is water here? Have you been here before? Amon explained, No, this is the first time I came down the mountain. But my ears are very good. I heard the sound of water just now. As he said this, he reached into his big bag and took out the pot. Schrodinger's tired body shrank in the innermost part of the bag, as if it was asleep. Even if it didn't show itself, it didn't feel suffocated. Amon ignored it. It wasn't time for Schrodinger to eat yet. He should eat first. He didn't want to use magic directly in front of Yun Numna, so he didn't use water magic to get water in the environment. Instead, he found a stream. In the moment when he bent down to get water, he quietly used the water purification spell to filter out the trace amount of sand and impurities in the stream. He found some shrubs by the river and made a fire to cook a pot of fragrant broth. The delicious meat floss was stored in the bone, which was in the bag. When Amon took the meat floss, he didn't take out the bone. Instead, he put his hand into the bag, as if the meat floss was always in the bag. He didn't forget that he couldn't easily reveal his identity as a sorcerer in front of anyone, even if it was just a shepherdess. Yun Numna looked at the pot of broth, and then looked at Amon. She quietly licked her lips, looking very cute. She should be hungry too. The broth cooled down first. There was only 1 spoon. They took turns to scoop soup from the pot. She enjoyed it very much. Amon finally had a chance to take a good look at her. The way she sat and drank the soup was very elegant. Anyone with a little bit of experience would have long suspected that Yun Numna was not a shepherdess. Her skin was so delicate, without a trace of hard work. But Amon had no experience in this. Except for Duk and the caveman's tribe, he had never been to other places since he was a child. Not to mention the caveman's tribe, it was very difficult to find a person in Duk without thick calluses on their hands, be it a man or a woman. If Aristotle wanted to find a child in Duk with no dust in his hair and no mud under his nails, he would probably only find Amon. Among the women outside, there were only 2 that Amon had any impression of, Gabriel and Iko Maria. Gabriel was very beautiful, but the first impression she gave people was that she was a majestic and inviolable supreme warrior. As for Iko Maria, she was Amon's dream. So when he saw Yun Numna, Amon was not too surprised. Maybe all the women outside the mountains were like this. Of course, Yun Numna was not as tall and strong as Gabriel, nor as pure and gentle as Iko Maria. She had a strange shyness about her, as if she was tempted to resist. Unfortunately, Amon was not tempted. He just felt that it was good, but he didn't want to do anything to her. In Amon's mind, no matter how beautiful this woman was, she could never be compared with Iko. He had learned message magic, and could read the 2 permanent messages left by Crazy Ol in the Taraculus. One was him kneeling in front of Crazy Ol, and the other was the line of words that Iko Maria had secretly written and then erased. Amon, my name is Iko. During his days in the dwarf's tribe, whenever he felt lonely, he would take out the Taraculus and read the 2 messages over and over again. The images kept appearing in front of him. He knew that Maria would never use this name again. Everyone would only call her the Adoratress. As a result, the name Icho seemed to belong to Amon alone. As if it was hiding some unknown secret, like the clouds in summer wrapped in raindrops that were about to fall. It was an indescribable feeling that even he did not quite understand. Although Yun Numna was beautiful, Aman did not think much about it. Maybe it was just because she was not eco. Yun Numna enjoyed it, but Aman enjoyed it even more. He had never eaten anything so delicious. The gray bread was dry and hard, as rough as a flat stone. But when it was soaked in the broth, it had an indescribable sweetness. This aroma was the pure aroma of wheat, but it was extremely delicious. Aman took a small bite and almost bit his tongue on the second bite. After the bread was soaked in the broth, even the taste of the broth was completely absorbed. It was like the most wonderful enjoyment in the world. Aman wanted to sigh as he ate. How could there be something so delicious in the world? Maybe it was because he was hungry, but he had never eaten such a bread. He simply could not find the right words to describe it. The pot Aman brought was not big. With the appetite of an intermediate warrior, he could finish a few pots of broth if he ate freely. At this moment, he gave half of it to Yun Numna. Of course, he was not full. Fortunately, there was a piece of bread. And such a delicious bread, Aman did not feel like it was too much. After eating, he licked his lips, still savoring the taste. Then he took the spoon that Yun Numna handed over, and continued to drink the broth. Without the flatbread, even the originally delicious meat soup seemed to have become tasteless at this moment. Aman ate the bread very quickly. Yun Numna was still drinking the broth, and the bread in her hand had not been touched. Seeing that Aman had finished eating, she handed over her piece and said, "You're not full, are you? This bread is for you too." Aman waved his hand in embarrassment and said, "No, I've had enough. You have to eat too. Half a pot of broth won't be enough. I ate too quickly because I think this bread is too delicious. I have never eaten such delicious food." Yun Numna said, "This is a bread I made myself. It's good that you like it. Your broth is very delicious. I can't eat such a big piece of bread, so I'll give you half. I'm happy to see you eat." Of course, Aman liked it. Half a pot of broth and half a piece of bread should be enough for a woman. He reached out and took the bread embarrassedly, broke off a small half, and returned the rest to Yun Numna and said, "This is enough, I'm already full. You made this bread yourself? That's amazing." When he ate the other half of the bread, Aman's speed was much slower. He chewed and savored the wonderful taste, almost melting his tongue. But no matter how slow he ate, there would be a time when he finished eating. He smacked his lips again, still savoring the taste. Yun Numna looked at him and secretly covered her mouth to laugh, but there was a hint of imperceptible surprise in her eyes. Of course, Aman liked delicious food. Who wouldn't like it? Eating was too magical for humans. The first thing to live in this world was to have food. Whether it was the lowliest slave or the high and mighty king, it was not only the most basic need for survival, but also a noble pursuit of life. But Aman was never greedy. No one taught him anything. This was a habit he had developed since he was a child. Whenever there was something delicious at home, he would let his father eat it first. His father was a miner and needed enough physical strength to mine. At the same time, he was also a drunkard. Of course, food should be eaten with wine. In the caveman tribe, Aman could enjoy all kinds of delicacies, and he always let Schrödinger eat the best first. The arrogant cat was calm, and over time, Aman got used to it. After eating, they continued on their way. Gradually, they saw fields, houses, and scattered small villages. Finally, they came to a place where people lived. They walked on a country road that could pass by carriages. There were more and more pedestrians on the road, and people looked at the man and woman curiously. Of course, their eyes stayed on Yun Numna, from her face to her calves. It was the first time that Aman saw so many people from outside the mountains. He was also very curious and could not help but look at the pedestrians passing by. Their clothes were very clean, but the fabric was not very sturdy. This was what Aman thought. As they walked, Aman couldn't help but ask Yun Numna in a low voice, "Why do people here look at us like this? Do I look like someone from the mountains? Haven't they seen me before?" Yun Numna laughed in a low voice. "That's because our clothes are too strange. I'm wearing a leather robe on such a hot day, and my skirt is torn." Her leather robe was given by Aman. In order to cover her torn sleeves and chest, the hem of her skirt was also torn. When she walked, her slender thighs could be seen. From the plateau to the Euphrates River, the temperature had risen a lot. It was already very hot in this season, but Amon didn't notice it at first. Of course, he was not afraid of the cold. After becoming an advanced warrior and a sorcerer, he would not feel too hot under normal circumstances, so he still wore a leather robe. Reminded by Yunumna, he realized that the clothes they were wearing were not right. He said casually, "Is there a shop in town that sells clothes? When we get there, I'll buy some clothes for you first, and I'll buy some new clothes too." Yunumna was surprised. "You're not only giving me a sheep, but also new clothes?" Amon laughed. "Why would you care about clothes when you already gave me a sheep? Your clothes are torn. You can't go back in a leather robe on such a hot day. I've eaten your delicious bread, so giving me clothes is nothing." It might be funny to say that everything in Duk was very expensive, but only the cloth was not. Most of the cloth was given away by the merchants when they sold other goods. As far as Amon could remember, he had never spent money on clothes. His father asked the merchants for the cloth when he bought wine, and then asked the women in the neighborhood to help him sew the cloth into simple clothes. The reason was very simple. The cloth used to make clothes was very light and took up almost no weight, and it could be stored for a long time. It could be transported in any season. There were several kinds of materials used to make clothes on the continent. The most common was linen, which was relatively coarse, but the finest linen could also be made very finely. Cotton was lighter and more comfortable, but also more expensive. Wool and cashmere could be spun into cloth, which was warmer than ordinary cloth, but more expensive. In addition to wool, the soft down of many animals could also be spun into cloth or woolen. Most of them could only be worn by the nobles. Ordinary people in winter had a thick cotton-padded coat to keep them warm, or they could wear clothes made of sheepskin. The fur of wild animals was also a good material, but it had to be hunted deep in the mountains, so it was also very expensive. The Duk miner's habit of wearing clothes was not about looking good. After working with ores and furnaces every day, even the most beautiful clothes would get dirty after a day. They only needed to be strong and durable. Therefore, the denser woven linen was the most popular. Compared to other goods sold by the merchants, the value of linen was negligible, and it was often given away as a bonus. Chapter 51. Pluck at the heartstrings of the story. Pleading for your monthly votes. Every time a new book is published, it has to rush to the monthly votes list. This seems to have become a symbol. In fact, before I start writing a work, I usually spend a long time thinking about it. Once the theme and plot are complete, I have a rough idea of what the result will be. But no matter what, the monthly votes list is a very important list. Perhaps it can be said that it is one of the most important lists after it is published. After years of writing, I write the story I want to tell, and write it for the readers who like it to read. Here, I have no desire to compare myself with others. But even if I don't fight with others, I have to fight with myself. After all, the purpose of rushing to the top of the list is to let more people who like this book have a chance to read it. This is also one of the most important purposes of writing a book. I specially open this single chapter, sincerely pleading for monthly votes from all my readers. I pray for your monthly votes to support me. I am clear about my writing style, so I don't shout any slogans like erupting into a storm. I will only use the pen in my hand to carefully write down every paragraph of the story. Dubhi is the 6th novel I have written, so there is no need for any more promises. Consistent standards and attitude, stable updates, and perfection have already become the label of my pen name. A new journey. Together with all my readers, I will read the rising wind and clouds of the Dubhi continent. Please cast your precious monthly votes, and pluck at the heartstrings of this legend. Chapter 52. The Lost Lamb. There were more than 1,000 people living in Som, so it was not a small town. But Amon had never been to other places, so he felt that this town was much smaller than Duk. But the sky was very blue, and the people were mostly wearing light linen or cotton clothes. Looking at the fields and the sheep, the livestock and the geese, it was obvious that this town was much wealthier than Duk. But the houses here were not beautiful or sturdy enough, and they seemed to be poorer than Duk. When they walked past the shrine in the town, Amon was even a little surprised. The shrine here was made of wood, and it was only 2 stories high. It was a far cry from the magnificent shrine in Duk built of lapis lazuli and white marble. He muttered in a low voice, "Why do people build shrines with wood? Most of the houses are made of wood. Aren't they afraid of fire?" Yun Num now explained in a low voice, "It's very expensive to transport the stone from the mountains and process it. It's cheap and convenient to build houses with wood here. But the shrine is made of cedar wood, which is different from ordinary wood." Amon asked, "Which kingdom is this? What god is worshipped in the shrine?" Yun Num Na answered, "This is the Babylon kingdom. The shrine is called the Shrine of Enlil." Amon was puzzled. "I heard that the main god of Babylon is King Marduk, while the main god of Hittite and Assur is Enlil. Why is the Shrine of Enlil built here?" Yun Num Na shrugged. "Maybe the realm of the gods is not exactly the same as the realm of the human world. In Babylon, the cities east of the Euphrates River build the Shrine of Marduk, while the cities west of the Euphrates River build the Shrine of Enlil. But the shrines also worship Marduk and other gods. Anyway, they belong to the same god. According to the legends, isn't Enlil Marduk's uncle?" Amon nodded and said, "Oh, so that's how it is." Amon did not pursue the matter any further. Yun Num Na asked, "Amon, aren't you curious?" Amon turned his head to look at her. "What's so strange about that? Isn't Enlil Marduk's uncle? As far as I know, the king god that the Empire of Igut believes in is Horus, but the most important temple in Igut is the Temple of Isis, where Horus and other gods are worshipped." Yun Num Na blinked her eyes. "I mean, how did the shrines come into being along the banks of the Euphrates River? Was there an agreement between the gods? Aren't you curious?" Curious? Curiosity about the gods had cost the lives of Crazy Ol and Bear, and so many people. And Amon had embarked on an unknown and treacherous path. He did not want to dwell on this question in front of Yun Num Na, so he answered with a bitter smile. "What's the use of being curious? I'm just a mortal. I don't know Marduk or Enlil, so I don't have anyone to ask. Yun Num Na, you know this place well. Where can I buy clothes? Let's go buy clothes first." Yun Num Na and Amon turned into a side street and entered a shop. A young shop assistant of about 16 or 17 came up to them and greeted them. "Are you looking for clothes? Just look around. We have the best goods in the area. We have both fabrics and ready-made clothes." It was easy for Amon to buy clothes. He pointed to himself and said, "I want ready-made clothes, as long as I can wear them." The assistant glanced at Amon. Obviously, he was not a nobleman. So he took a set of the best light cotton clothes, printed with red stripes. It was very eye-catching, but there were no other patterns or embroidery. The assistant said, "This set of clothes costs 30 copper coins. It's cool and breathable in hot weather. You can't find it anywhere else." Amon, however, thought that the cloth was not strong enough. He pointed to a set of coarse linen clothes, which were also light but densely woven, and said, "I want this shirt and a pair of trousers made of the same cloth. Give me 2 sets." The assistant was a little disappointed. 10 copper coins for a set with pants, 20 for 2 sets. Don't you want to look for anything else? Amon shook his head. "I don't need it." Yun Num Na, "What kind of clothes do you want to buy? Take your pick." Yun Num Na pointed to a long dress hanging on the wall. "This one is beautiful. I like it. Will it be very expensive?" When the shop assistant turned his head and saw Inanna's appearance clearly, his eyes immediately lit up. He stared at her face and body and couldn't move his eyes away. When he heard the question, he came back to his senses and replied, "Miss, you really have a good eye. Among the clothes we sell, this is the best color that commoners can wear. It's just that it's a little more expensive. It costs 60 copper coins." As the assistant spoke, he glanced at Amon. Amon didn't care how the assistant looked at him. Without thinking, he took out a silver coin and handed it over, saying, "That's all. I'll buy it. Do you have a place to change? Let her change first." The assistant was surprised. He nodded and said, "Yes, yes, yes. Go through the small door behind the counter. You can change inside." Then he took the silver coin and gave Amon 20 copper coins. When Yun Namna finished changing and came out, Amon's eyes lit up. The set of clothes she chose was extremely fitting. It was made of fine white cotton with indigo stripes printed on it. It perfectly outlined her dainty figure, and there was almost no part of it that wasn't alluring. The assistant's eyes were fixed on her. Yun Namna spun around and asked playfully, "Amon, do I look good?" Amon nodded. "Yes, you look good. You look even better in this dress." The assistant also praised, "Miss, you are so beautiful. May I know your name?" Yun Namna looked back and smiled. "My name is Yun Namna. Can I get a pair of shoes for buying such an expensive dress?" "Such an expensive dress? Is it really that expensive?" Amon had no idea. Since he had to spend money to buy clothes, of course they were expensive, but it was not a big deal. He only spent 80 copper coins to buy 2 sets of clothes and a skirt. It was not even enough to buy a bottle of the cheapest wine in Duk. Inanna's laughter almost made the waiter's bones melt. He took out a pair of cloth shoes from behind the counter. The thick and soft linen soles looked very comfortable. He smiled and said, "Of course. Come often when you're free. We have all kinds of beautiful clothes here." Yun Namna smiled at him again. She did not say thank you. She pointed at Amon and said, "These are not my shoes. He paid for them. You should give him a pair of shoes that he can wear. This pair is too small." Ah. The assistant was disappointed, but Yun Namna was still looking at him with a smile. He took out another pair of shoes that Amon could wear, and gave them to Yun Namna together with the original pair. He said, "Okay, I'll give you one more pair. The other pair is my gift to you, miss." Yun Namna covered her mouth and laughed. "You gave me 2 pairs of shoes at once. Aren't you afraid that the boss will scold you when he comes back?" The assistant immediately became energetic. He puffed out his chest and said, "What's there to be afraid of? The boss is my father. This shop belongs to my family. Miss, you must come here often. I'll give you a discount." Judging from the tone of his words and the expression in his eyes, it was hard to tell whether he wanted to give or take advantage of her. After changing into the new clothes, they walked into the town again. This time they attracted even more attention. Almost all the passers-by stared at Yun Namna. Her face, her breasts, her body. If it were someone else, they would feel uncomfortable being stared at like this. But Yun Namna was still smiling. After leaving the shop, Amon asked again, "Where can I find a place to sell sheep? Let's go buy sheep." Yun Namna said, "Of course not on the street. There's a market at the other end of the town." Every country in the continent had a similar rule. Slaves were not allowed to wear dyed cloth, and civilians were not allowed to wear embroidered clothes. Yun Namna claimed to be a shepherdess, but she wore a dress dyed with indigo stripes. But Amon had no experience in this aspect, because there were almost no slaves in the town of Duk. Most of the residents of Duk were miners. Only the mayor and Lord Shog had servants to take care of their daily needs. There were some mining slaves in the mines outside the town. They did the same work as miners and wore the same clothes. Amon just thought that the dress Yun Namna looked so beautiful that even he couldn't help but look at it. When they arrived in the town, the dazzling Yun Namna caused quite a commotion. Amon was not afraid of being stared at. He had dared to look Iko Maria in the eye. He was worshipped as a god by the cavemen. He had been the center of attention more than once in Duk. So what if he was stared at by the townspeople? He just felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Almost every stall owner would come up to greet them. Then they would glance at Amon's linen clothes and straw sandals. Their expressions were a little strange, as if they felt that it was a pity that Yun Namna was standing next to him. But after walking around the market, they still couldn't find the white sheep with black spots that Yun Namna mentioned. She looked very disappointed, as if she was about to cry again. Amon comforted her. "Can you get another sheep? Anyway, what you lost was just a sheep. I can give you a bigger and better one." Yun Namna pouted and shook her head. "No, that's the sheep I'm looking for. If we go out of the town, there is a sheep pasture. There are more sheep there. Let's go to the shepherd and buy one, okay?" Amon nodded. "Okay, let's keep looking." They had already swaggered around some. and almost everyone in the town was talking about a young man wearing straw sandals and a sackcloth, who had brought a beautiful girl to the town. The girl was wearing old clothes. The young man took her to old Joseph's tailor shop and bought her a beautiful and expensive new dress. It was said that the young man only bought 2 sets of linen clothes for himself. He was very stingy and asked the girl to ask little Joseph for 2 pairs of shoes. Life in the town was dull and boring. This kind of thing was the easiest topic to spread. People were talking about how the young man must have kidnapped a girl and eloped. They must have come from far away, because the young man spoke with a Hittite accent. Aman followed Yun Namna to the outskirts of the town. Sure enough, they saw the sheep grazing leisurely. Yun Namna suddenly pointed in surprise. "Look, that's the sheep I'm looking for." Aman turned his head and was stunned. "Yun Namna, why are you pointing at me?" Yun Namna patted him and said, "Look over there." Aman turned his head to the other side. There were indeed a few sheep with black spots in the flock. At this moment, Yun Namna ran over and squatted down to pick up a sheep. She shouted in surprise, "That's it, Aman. It's the sheep I lost." "Miss, don't talk nonsense. That's my sheep." The shepherd with a long whip walked over from afar and shouted unhappily. He was a burly old man. Aman quickly walked over and reminded Yun Namna. "How could this be your sheep? It can't even fly. How could it come here from so far away? Are you sure you're not mistaken?" The old man glanced at Aman and said to Yun Namna, "This is my master's sheep. Every morning, I drive them to the hillside to graze. Every evening, I drive them back to the sheepfold. I count them carefully every day. This sheep is definitely not yours." However, Yun Namna refused to let go of the sheep. She cried at Aman again, "But this is the sheep I lost. I know it. Aman, help me." The shepherd was angry. "Beautiful lady, you can't be so unreasonable. It's my sheep." Seeing that the two of them were about to argue, if Yun Namna was not a lady, the old shepherd would probably have lashed out with his whip. Aman quickly stood in the middle and tried to mediate. "Maybe it's a sheep that looks similar. She's been looking for it for a whole day. It's inevitable that she's a little anxious. How about this? I want to buy this sheep. How much is it worth?" Before the shepherd could speak, Yun Namna stood up and pulled Aman back. She said, "This is clearly my sheep. Why do you want to buy it? He stole my sheep." The shepherd finally lost his temper. He pointed his whip at Aman's nose and said, "Foreigner, did you bring this lady here to be a bandit? Be careful of my whip." Yun Namna hid behind Aman and said, "We're not bandits. You're the thief. You stole my sheep." Aman didn't care about the shepherd's whip. He spread his arms and said, "Uncle, don't be angry. She lost a sheep that looks exactly like this one and thinks it's hers. I promised to help her find it. I can buy your sheep." The shepherd snorted and cracked his whip. "I'm not selling it. It's my master's sheep," Aman said. "If I give you more money, your master won't blame you. He'll be even happier." The shepherd looked at him, held up 2 fingers and said with disdain, "Well, 2 silvers if you don't want to buy it, take it or not." He loathed these 2 strangers. The girl called him a thief, and the young man stood in front of the girl, which made him look even worse. So he offered a ridiculous price, hoping to get rid of them. But before he could finish speaking, Aman had already taken out 2 silver coins and handed them over. The shepherd's eyes widened. He even forgot to reach out to take the coins. Aman pulled his hand over and placed the coins in his palm. "This is money. Keep it safe. Can you give me a rope so I can take the sheep away?" The things outside the mountains were really cheap. Aman had already said he was willing to pay more, but he didn't expect it to be only 2 silver coins. The shepherd stared at Aman as if he was looking at a monster. The sheep wasn't big. 2 silver coins could buy 5 of them. He had made a small fortune today. He looked at Aman for a long time. Then he suddenly came back to his senses. He took off his whip and gave it to Aman. "Use this to tie the sheep. There's no other rope here." Then he lowered his voice and whispered, "Young man, you are a generous person. Why don't you buy yourself some nice clothes if you have money? That girl is beautiful, but I'm afraid you can't afford it." Aman thanked him, tied the sheep with the whip, and led it away from the pasture. When they were far away, Yunamna hugged Amon's arm and whispered in his ear. Amon, do you think I'm being unreasonable? But this sheep is really mine. I can swear that it's exactly the same as the one I lost. Amon smiled bitterly. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's not. But there's no proof. It's in someone else's flock. Unless someone can prove that this sheep came from your flock, you can't just take it away. The place where you lost the sheep is very far from here. It's unlikely that it came here by itself. There are also many sheep with black spots in that flock. Maybe it's really similar. Yunamna said. Every sheep has a different spot. Of course the shepherd can recognize it. Anyway, I want to thank you for buying this sheep. But why did you spend so much money? You're very strong. You don't have to be afraid of the shepherd's blackmail. How can he be a match for you? Amon shook his head. I went to buy the sheep, not to steal it. If I can prove that the sheep is yours, I don't mind helping you get it back. Unfortunately, I can't prove it. It's not that I don't trust you. Yunamna lowered her head. But this way, I owe you too much. How can I repay you? Amon smiled. You've already repaid me. You brought me to town and gave me such delicious cakes. Yunamna said. But your sheep is too expensive. If I didn't say that, you wouldn't have spent so much money. Amon shrugged. It's not expensive. I think it's very cheap. Yunamna took the whip from Amon's hand and led the sheep. The two passed through the market and returned to town. The reason Amon was looking for a place with people was nothing more than to experience all kinds of people and things. He had no specific purpose. When he returned to the town, he found that the people were looking at them strangely, pointing behind their backs and whispering to each other. But when he turned his head to look, people avoided his eyes again. Although Amon had no experience of going out, he was not really stupid. He scanned the area with detection magic and roughly knew what people were talking about. He couldn't help but feel a little amused. At this time, he also realized that Yunamna was not an ordinary shepherdess. He had seen many people outside the mountains, including many women, but none of them were as tender and beautiful as Yunamna. As they walked past the tavern in town, Yunamna suddenly stopped and said, Amon, are you tired? If you are, you can go in and have a drink. Amon suddenly remembered something. Mayor Dusty once said that the cheapest glass of wine in the tavern was only 1 copper coin. He had always been skeptical, but he really wanted to go and see it. So he said to Yunamna, I don't know if it will take up your time if I go in and have a drink. How about I send you back first? It will be dark soon after we leave town. Yunamna asked in return, Are you going to send me back? Amon, you still have a long way to go after dark, so of course I have to send you back. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry and the town is right here. Yunamna smiled. Thank you. It will be dark anyway, and there is still a long way to go after dark. Go in and rest for a while. Wine was a luxury, but not only for the nobles. Many commoners would drink a few glasses in the taverns when they had money and time. It was the most luxurious enjoyment on a daily basis. In the history of the Heavens Pivot, some countries used to prohibit their commoners from drinking alcohol, because brewing wine consumed a lot of food, and it needed to be controlled during difficult times when supplies were tight. People tended to think and complain when they had too much to drink, say things and do things that they would not normally dare to say. So the tavern was often one of the most chaotic places in a town. When Amon walked into the tavern with Yunamna, they immediately heard a commotion. But when they saw them come in, many people started whispering to each other. Clearly, the topic of discussion in the tavern was about the 2 foreigners who had come to town today. Amon found an empty table and sat down. There was a boss and 2 waiters there. The boss personally came over and asked, Young man who has come from afar, what would you like to drink? We have the best wine in the area. Amon spoke very directly. The first thing he asked was what he was most concerned about. Is the cheapest wine here 1 copper coin a glass? The boss was taken aback for a moment before he smiled and said, Yes, 1 copper coin a glass. Would you like a glass? Although he was smiling, there was a hint of disdain in his eyes. He had heard about what happened to the foreigners in town. This young man was very generous to the ladies, but he was very stingy himself. Now that he saw it, It was indeed true. How could one glass of wine be enough? Amon waved it off and said, "I'll have a jug of wine." The boss called for the waiters to bring over a jug of wine and 2 glasses. Yun Namna very naturally reached out to take the jug of wine, and poured a glass for Amon. However, she did not sit down and just stood next to Amon while holding the jug of wine. Very few women would come to the tavern to drink. Occasionally, those who did come were prostitutes from town. The brothels were another chaotic place in town. With such a beautiful woman in town being brought into the tavern by Amon, everyone's eyes were focused on Yun Namna. They were all waiting to see a beautiful woman drink wine. This was much better than a side dish, but they did not expect that she would not drink it. Amon was about to ask Yun Namna to sit down when the tavern owner asked, "Miss, why aren't you sitting down? Could it be that someone doesn't want you to sit down?" Yun Namna smiled and explained, "No, I'm a female slave, so I can't just sit here and drink. Amon, take your time and drink. I'll stand here and pour the wine for you." So that was the reason. The whispers in the tavern immediately became louder, like a swarm of flies buzzing around. This girl was a female slave brought here by the foreigners. He was wearing cheap clothes, but he dressed the female slave up beautifully to show off in front of everyone. He even violated the rules by buying a dyed dress for her. Chapter 53. Some people even speculated that this young man had kidnapped a beautiful slave girl from a noble family and secretly ran away from Hittite to Babylon. There were also people who thought in their hearts, "If I had such a charming and beautiful slave girl, I would definitely dress her up beautifully, but not for others to see, only for myself. In fact, wearing nothing is the most beautiful. Holding her in bed is simply the most erotic enjoyment in the world." Amon drank his wine, and the people in the tavern began to speculate. Finally, a drunken voice asked loudly, "Foreigner, did you kidnap this girl?" Amon raised his head and answered, "She brought me to this town to look for the lost sheep." Yun Namna also smiled and said, "I wasn't kidnapped by him. I brought him here. He is a good man who helped me." At this time, the tavern owner hurried over and said, "He's drunk. Please don't mind him." Then he ran over to the drunken man. He was afraid that if they said something wrong, it would cause a conflict and damage the tavern. Amon felt that the atmosphere around him was not right. Some people looked at him with hostility. He didn't want to stay here any longer. This wine, which cost 1 copper coin a cup, was not very tasty. It was not even as good as the wild fruit wine brewed by the cavemen. He drank very quickly. Yun Namna stood beside him and kept pouring wine. When he finished, Amon put down the cup and asked, "Boss, what is the most expensive wine in your tavern?" The tavern owner was surprised again. He took out a delicate copper bottle from behind the counter and walked to the table. "This is the best wine in our tavern. There are only 2 bottles. 1 silver coin a bottle." Amon reached into his big leather bag and found that the 3 silver coins he took out earlier were all gone. There were only 20 copper coins left. Thus, he took out a small leather pouch from his bosom and took out 2 silver coins. "I want both bottles of wine. How much is this jug of wine?" Amon recognized the bottle. It was the same one his father gave him when he left Duk. It cost 15 silver coins in his hometown, but only 1 silver coin here. Amon didn't buy it for himself. He wasn't a big drinker. These 2 bottles were for Schrödinger. The tavern owner's eyes were a little dazed. He touched his forehead as if he was wiping sweat. He nodded. "You bought these 2 bottles. I'll give you the pot for free." Amon's trip to the town today always brought him extra rewards. He got 2 pairs of shoes when he bought clothes, a whip when he bought sheep, and a pot of wine when he bought wine. But he didn't like this town. He just wanted to send Yun Namna back as soon as possible, then cross the Euphrates River and continue his journey eastward. At least he learned one thing from this place. The world beyond the mountains was indeed very different from Duk. Amon put the 2 bottles of wine into the big leather bag. Schrödinger was still sleeping in the innermost pocket. He left the tavern with Yun Namna. The 2 outlanders left, but the tavern owner stood there blankly for a long time. Someone next to him shouted, Shoot, what's wrong with you? Has your soul been taken away by that slave? Why don't you talk about it and buy her for a high price? I'd like to know how much such a beautiful slave is worth. Another voice shouted. That foreigner drinks the cheapest wine himself, but he bought 2 bottles of the most expensive wine. Is he going to give them to the slave tonight? He's really nice to her. If I could afford a slave like her, I'd be willing to feed her such expensive wine. The tavern owner, Shoot, finally came back to his senses. He shouted. Buy her? Guess what I just saw? It's a parangan and more than one. It's in the young man's bag. Aman didn't want to show off when he paid. He just opened a small corner of the bag. The others couldn't see what was inside, but the tavern owner, who was standing next to him, saw the luster of the parangons. This situation was too strange. Parangons were a symbol of nobility. How could a man with a lot of parangons in his pocket drink a cup of wine that costs 1 copper coin? The atmosphere in the tavern immediately boiled up. People began to discuss loudly with each other, their faces red. The story of the foreigner was interpreted into another version. The young man should be a servant of a great noble family. He stole his master's money and eloped with a beautiful slave girl. The slave girl should be very loved by her former master. She ate and wore the best food and clothes. The young man must have wronged her by spending so much money. The young man himself was very stingy. He didn't want to arouse suspicion by spending too much money, or he was poor and didn't know how to spend it. Someone started counting with his fingers in a drunken stupor. A parangan was worth 20 gold coins, a gold coin was worth 20 silver coins, and a silver coin was worth 100 copper coins. The dress that the young man bought for the girl was worth 60 copper coins. How many dresses like that could be bought with 1 parangan? The correct answer was 666 dresses and change for 1 copper coin. No one could figure it out. In short, it was a lot. Everyone felt that the dress that Aman bought for Yunamna was too cheap. He had a lot of parangons in his pocket, but he bought a dress that was only worth 60 copper coins for such a beautiful girl. There must be something wrong with the young man's money. No one noticed that while the group of drunkards were making wild guesses, 2 people were whispering to each other at the best, largest, and cleanest table in the corner. They paid the bill and left in a hurry. Aman asked outside the town. Yunamna, where do you live? Where should I send you? Yunamna said. The place where you met me is fine. My sheep pen is not far from there. I can walk back by myself. Aman thought for a moment and said, Well, I'll send you back to where you came from. Take your lamb home quickly. By the time they were halfway back, the sky had gradually darkened. The half-moon rose. Under the tranquil moonlight, they could see the undulating grass slope. The night was a gentle and quiet beauty. If the experience in the town made them a little unhappy, they had already forgotten about it in the beautiful scenery. They could not walk too fast under the moonlight. It was like they were taking a stroll together. Yunamna was holding a lamb in her hand. After walking for a while, Aman's face suddenly darkened and he stopped. Yunamna asked curiously, What's wrong? Are you tired again? Aman shook his head. No, someone is watching us. Yunamna showed a look of panic. It's the middle of the night. Why are there people here? Where are they? Why don't I see them? Aman said, There are people in front of us and behind us. They should be coming for us. Yunamna, don't be afraid. I'll send them away. I'll send you back safely. After saying that, he let go of Yunamna's waist and shouted with his iron stick in his hand. Since you're here, why are you hiding there? I don't know you and I don't owe you money. Why are you armed in the middle of the night? A sneer came from the front. 2 people came out. The one in front was holding a sword, and the one behind was holding a staff. The one with the staff shouted, Foreigner, you stole your master's money and kidnapped the slave girl. How dare you show off in Sam? The one with the sword shouted, We'll cut to the chase. Leave the money and the slave girl, and we'll spare your life. Along with the voice, 3 people came out from the grassy slope behind them. They were holding axes and clubs. Obviously, they were not here for good. Yunamna shrank beside Aman in fear and whispered, Don't believe them. They want to rob you and kidnap me. They will kill you. How can you let others know about this? The first thing that came to his mind was his neighbor, Maki, the third-level warrior who tried to rob and kill Amon in the charcoal forest, but was killed by Crazy Ol. The second thing that came to his mind was the three things that Crazy Ol had told him. First, he should not kill people rashly. Even if he had to, he should use the least amount of force. He asked curiously, You are holding a staff. Are you a mage? If you're a mage, why would you do such a thing? As soon as he said that, a voice behind him shouted in panic, Master Venu, he recognized you. Don't let him go. The swordsman shouted angrily, Shut up, handsome. Then he turned to Amon and said, Now that you know there's a noble mage here, hand over the money and the slave girl and ask for forgiveness for your crimes. These people were inexperienced robbers. It was the first time they had done such a thing. The two in front of them were the sons of the mayor of Som. The elder was called Gay, a second-level warrior, and the younger was called Venu, a first-level mage. Of course, Som could not be compared to Duk, which produced important strategic resources. So the position of the mayor was not high. He was just the lowest noble in the kingdom of Babylon. The mayor sent his youngest son to a nearby city to learn magic. Venu spent almost half of the family's money to become a first-level mage. This time, when he returned home from the city, he asked his father for money and bribed the priest, hoping to get a position as a priest in the temple of the city. But the mayor's father was not willing to give him so much money. Instead, he persuaded his son to become a priest in the shrine of the town. Anyway, the negotiation fell through. It was really difficult for the family to get the money that Venu wanted. So he dragged his brother Guy to the tavern to drink and vent his depression. But when they saw Amon and Yunamna in the tavern, they learned that Amon had a huge sum of money, so they were tempted. When a person drank too much, they would also become more daring. They actually wanted to murder for money. The two brothers discussed it and decided that the money would go to the younger brother, while the beautiful female slave would go to the older brother. Having made up their mind, the two brothers left the town with 3 strong servants armed with weapons. They walked faster than Amon and took a shortcut to block Amon. The servants were not drunk, and it was the first time they had done such a crime, so they were a little timid. As soon as Amon mentioned the mage, the servant named Handsome thought that he recognized Venu. Venu was the only mage in Som, so he didn't need to mention his name to know who he was. Gay scolded the servant, waiting for Amon to kneel down and beg for mercy. Take your weapons and leave now, and I will forgive you. Amon suddenly said something that no one expected. There was an inexplicable majesty in his voice, like a noble priest, or even a god. Although Amon was young, he was very majestic when he was serious. This temperament was cultivated unconsciously. Don't forget that he had always been regarded as a god by the cavemen. Amon did not like to put on airs, but the cat beside him was more arrogant than anyone else. He watched Schrödinger every day, so how could he not learn it? Both Venu and Gay were shocked. For a moment, they even had the illusion that Amon was a lord who was traveling incognito. But then they felt that this illusion was ridiculous. Which lord would walk at night in straw sandals? Guy laughed out loud as if he was emboldening himself. He raised his sword and said, Foreigner, you're courting death. According to Article 18 of the Babylon Kingdom's Code, commoners who steal or abduct other people's slaves will be sentenced to death. Let me carry out the execution here. You're courting death. Amon was afraid that he would hurt Yunamna, so he did not want to wait for the others to surround him. He took a step forward and swung his iron staff at Gay's shoulder. Amon's staff looked like an ordinary branch. When he swung it, it was light and did not move at all. Gay's face was full of ridicule. His sword was not made of the best damask steel, but it was made of sharp fine iron. It cost him 15 silver coins, but this foreigner attacked him with a branch. Maybe Gay wanted to show off. He suddenly shouted and slashed at the branch with both hands, trying to cut Amon and the branch in half. He had used quite a bit of strength. This sword strike was enough to split a tree in half, let alone an inconspicuous withered branch. But when the sword hit the branch, it made a sound of metal colliding. In the darkness of the night, dazzling sparks flew. With a harsh sound, the slender fine iron sword was broken in half. The deformed tip of the sword flew out, and the other half, together with the hilt, fell to the ground. The web between Gay's thumb and index finger was torn. Amon's branch seemed to be light when it hit the sword, but it carried a strange shock. The shock wave went straight into Gay's body. Half of Gay's body was numb, and he could not make a sound even if he wanted to. Amon's staff did not seem to be affected at all. It continued to move forward and hit Gay's right shoulder. There was no blood or flesh splattering, but Gay's body went limp and he fell to the ground. He was a second-level warrior, but Amon could not tell which level he was using. This was the technique of Duk miners. But this time, Amon was using an iron staff instead of a sledgehammer, and he was not hitting the core. It took Amon only one strike to knock Gay down, but it showed the perfect combination of speed, strength, agility and accuracy. He was not proficient in martial arts, and no one could teach him the various fighting techniques on the battlefield. When he practiced body arts in the caveman's tribe, he would go hunting and see all kinds of beasts. There were not many tricks to fighting with beasts. Simple and effective attacks were the most important. What's more, Amon always caught a beast alive. He never killed a beast on the spot, which was much more difficult than killing a beast. Amon had this habit. On the one hand, he could bring a live beast back to the village for fresh meat. On the other hand, Link also liked to experiment with different kinds of wild animals. He tried not to let his clansmen risk their lives to hunt. Amon did not care what kind of beast could be domesticated. He only cared about letting his clansmen catch it alive. So when he went hunting, he always had a group of people following him. Some people in the surrounding valleys drove the beasts to where Amon was, and a group of people with ropes and sticks followed Amon. Amon waved his iron staff and knocked down the beasts one by one. The cavemen rushed to tie them up and carry them away. Every time this happened, the tribe would be as lively as a festival. Amon usually fought with the King Iron back. It was not a real fight, but just a test of skills. Guy's sword looked fierce, but it was far inferior to the tail whip of the Ironback King Elmarch. After a successful strike, Amon walked past Gay, waved his iron staff down, and pointed at the same position on Gay's left shoulder. Then he suddenly rushed forward like a beast. His staff struck out with the sound of the wind, and a ball of fire was scattered in the air. Wenu was a mage. Under normal circumstances, he should have used magic to cover or help Gay. But he did not expect that his brother, a second-level warrior, would be defeated by this stranger in the blink of an eye. It was too late for him to use magic, so he hurriedly sent a fireball at Amon. First-level mages could only use simple low-level magic. Fire magic was powerful, dazzling, and very impressive. Many people liked to learn it first, and Wenu was no exception. This magic was naturally powerful against ordinary people, but it was also strange and difficult to imitate against ordinary warriors. Because it was a magical power that no one else could master, it had a very good deterrent and damage effect. But Amon's judgment was very accurate, and he was not afraid at all. He rushed forward without dodging, and scattered the fireball as if it was a firefly. Wenu let out a cry of alarm. It was too late for him to cast any magic spells. Amon's iron staff was swung towards him. The tip of the staff swept across his face with a sharp sound of wind. He felt a sharp pain as if his face was being cut by a knife. It was so close to smashing his head. But it was not his head that was smashed. With a crack, Wenu's staff was broken into several pieces. His staff naturally did not attract Amon's attention. It was just a hard walnut wood that had been processed by magic and inlaid with an ordinary parangan. No matter how hard the walnut wood was, how could it withstand Amon's staff? As the staff broke, the parangan at the top was crushed into powder. Wenu let out a hoarse cry and spat out a mouthful of blood. Wenu was injured, but it was not Amon who injured him. When his staff was suddenly destroyed while he was casting magic, he could not vent the power that he had been channeling. If he did not control it well, it would backfire on the caster. His body felt as if it was being burned. The parangan was not broken by Amon either. Amon was not that wasteful. It was also because his staff was destroyed while he was casting magic. Yunamna, come here. All of you, put down your weapons. Amon held his staff, raised his foot and stepped on Wenu's cheek. He shouted coldly at the three servants in the distance. Yunamna had already rushed to Amon's side. Before the three servants could react, they saw the two young masters who were usually arrogant and powerful were beaten to the ground in the blink of an eye. The young master Wenu's head was also stepped on, and his life could be taken at any time. They dropped the axes and sticks in their hands, knelt on the ground and shouted, "Foreigner, no noble warrior, spare our young masters. If they die, we will die too." Amon looked at them with a slightly strange look and asked, "You are really interesting. Why are you begging me to spare these two young masters? Does it have anything to do with me whether you are alive or not? Don't forget that you wanted to kill me with weapons. Why are you begging me for mercy on behalf of others? I haven't said I will spare you." The servants shouted, "Noble warrior, we were forced to do this. We wanted to dissuade the two young masters, but we couldn't. We didn't want to do this at all, but we had to come." Yun Numna whispered to Amon, "Don't let them go. Don't let any of them go. Amon, you surprised me too much. I didn't expect you to be so powerful. If you didn't beat them today, they would not let us go. You would be killed and your money would be taken away, and I would be taken away by force. Did they think of sparing you? All of them deserve to die." Amon pointed his staff at the three servants and said, "As a servant, I should not be responsible for whether or not I can dissuade my master. I know what kind of punishment you will receive, so just accept it. I have no intention of punishing you. You are not worthy of my help." Then he pointed to Gay, who was lying on the ground, and said, "You might as well not have the power. Otherwise, you will only bring more harm and disaster to yourself and others." Then he pointed to Venu. "You don't deserve to use the staff." After saying this, he kicked Venu, who was vomiting blood, down the grassy slope. Venu rolled to Gay's side. Then he turned to the three servants and said, "Carry them back. Get out of here now." "Thank you for your kindness." The three servants bowed to Amon, then hurried to carry the two young masters on their backs. One of them picked up the rest of the belongings and hurried away in the night. When Venu was casting his magic, his staff was suddenly destroyed. For a mage, the injury he suffered would leave a terrible shadow for the rest of his life. Gay's injury was very minor. Amon had only cracked the cartilage of his shoulder. But this kind of injury was extremely difficult to heal, which meant that he might not be able to wield his sword with his body arts anymore. As for the three servants, Amon had no interest in dealing with them. He knew that when they returned, they would only end up worse than the two young masters. He remembered that when he was in Duk, Mayor Dusty's son Moses made a mistake outside. When he returned home, he was punished not to eat for a day and had to copy the instructions of the gods. But the two servants who took care of Moses were beaten half to death. The two young masters had made such a big mistake and suffered such a serious injury, right in front of the three servants. It was not hard to imagine what would happen to them when they returned home. Maybe they should run away now. When they gradually disappeared under the moonlight, Amon turned around and put his arm around Yunamna's waist. "Did I scare you? Don't be afraid. Let's keep going." Chapter 54. Yunamna's body was soft and supple. She leaned on Amon and said sweetly, "With a strong and handsome hunter like you around, of course I won't be afraid. But why did you forgive them? They obviously wanted to kill you, so they don't deserve your pity. Leaving enemies behind might bring danger to yourself." Amon thought for a while and answered, "I'm not interested and I don't think it's worth it. I've already given them their punishment. I just don't want to kill them. They're not my enemies, they're their enemies. Since they dared to let them go, I don't care. An elder once told me that if I choose to forgive, I have to understand and be able to bear the consequences. I have to know if it's to resolve the hatred or to bring more harm to myself or others." Yunamna looked at him. Her eyes under the moonlight seemed to be asking something. She still smiled and said, "Your elder is really interesting, but you're even more interesting. A young and handsome hunter, but the tone you speak is like that of a god." "Is it?" Amon didn't think so himself. He didn't know what kind of tone a god spoke in. He continued to stroll in the beautiful scenery. Looking at Yunamna's expression, it was as if nothing had happened, as if she was intoxicated in Amon's arms. Aman did not speak for a long time as he walked. No one knew what he was thinking. Seeing his silence, Yunamna asked in a weak tone. Aman, are you angry at me for not speaking? It's because of me that you've caused so much trouble. Aman shook his head and said, You've misunderstood. I'm not speaking because the night is beautiful. I don't want to disturb this peaceful enjoyment. It's not your fault. Why should I be angry at you? I've been punished in front of the whole town. Someone wanted to chop off one of my fingers. I've also been blamed by the kingdom. Someone wanted to chop off my head. But I know in my heart that I've done nothing wrong. Since I've been through this, why should I blame you today? Yunamna covered her mouth and exclaimed, Aman, so you have so many legendary stories. I admire you so much, you are my hero. No matter how long the journey was, it would eventually come to an end. As they spoke, they finally arrived at the grassy slope where they met Yunamna. Aman looked around and asked curiously, Where are your sheep and sheepfold? Why don't I send you home? Yunamna untied the whip and handed it to Aman. This is a gift from the shepherd. Keep it. I live nearby, so you don't have to send it to me. My master won't be happy if he sees you. Thank you, handsome hunter. I won't forget you. I really want to see you again. Lost lamb, come home with me. She lifted her skirt and ran briskly in the moonlight. She went around a grassy slope and disappeared. The little lamb was not led by a rope, but it bounced along with Yunamna's footsteps. It looked very affectionate and happy. Aman was stunned when he saw this scene. A sheep following Yunamna on its own. It seemed that it was really the one she lost. Yunamna ran to a place where Aman could not see or detect her with detection magic. The sheep following her suddenly disappeared. Yunamna's figure also turned into a wisp of smoke and flew into the distance. At the end of the grassy slope was a hill. On the top of a small hill stood a burly old man. Yunamna's figure stopped not far in front of him. The two seemed to have arranged to meet here. If Aman had seen the old man, he would have been surprised to find that he was the shepherd he had met outside Som. Yunamna stopped and smiled. Enroll, you lost. The young hunter did all the things you asked for. He was not captivated by my beauty. He did not eat all the bread in my hand because of greed. He did not ask for more than what he needed because of greed. He did not delay his work because of laziness. He did not hurt others because of anger. He did not envy others for having better things than himself. The shepherd interrupted her with a slightly sarcastic tone. Yes, look at the dress he bought for you. It's more expensive and beautiful than the clothes he bought for himself. But you look really funny wearing it. Yunamna ignored the shepherd's sarcasm. She continued. He did not become arrogant because of his power and wealth. He did not display the ridiculous sense of superiority of mortals. The shepherd nodded. There was no sign of disappointment on his face. You won. From now on you can enter and leave my realm freely. You also redeemed the lost town of Duk. But what's the point of all this? Yunamna smiled. Maybe it's meaningful, maybe it's meaningless. But I have to try. Great God Enrol, even you will lose to me. The shepherd sneered. In the long years, you will find someone like me. I'm just curious. How did you find him so quickly? That young man bought a lamb with 2 silver coins. He didn't even bargain with me. Yunamna laughed. Her laughter was as crisp as a silver bell in the night. The reason is simple. He grew up in Duk. I'm afraid he would laugh at you for selling him too cheaply. Enrol, great God. You don't always keep your eyes on everyone. I may have lost my flock, but I found a lost lamb. Enrol's expression changed slightly. No wonder he has such power as a 5th-level sorcerer. He was able to defeat those 2 just now. It was indeed the skills of the Dushans. You actually managed to find the miners of Duk alive, and you just so happened to meet the conditions I put forward? Yunamna laughed even more happily. Yes. Just before you unleashed the flood of wrath, there was a child who was exiled from Duk. It was said that he secretly offered the gods tear to Isis. But it wasn't his fault. It took me a long time to find him. In the future, when the people of Duk return to that land, it will still be my divine realm. The shepherd said. Murin, why are you laughing so happily? Everything is still full of unknown dangers. Yun-Nam-Na called the shepherd, Great God Enril, and the shepherd called Yun-Nam-Na Murin. How surprised would Amon be if he heard this? No wonder Amon felt that Yun-Nam-Na looked familiar, but he was sure that he had never seen this person before. It was because he had seen the statue of Murin in the shrine in the town, but he could not associate that solemn stone statue with the beautiful Yun-Nam-Na. Inanna replied, I'm happy because even the great god Enlil sometimes miscalculated. Don't forget our bet. If there is such a person, as long as he is not bewitched by my beauty and does not eat all the bread in my hand, and comes to you to redeem what I have lost, and does not turn the redemption into robbery or abandonment of his promise, I will be considered to have won the bet. If he fulfills all the other requirements, you will not harm the people of Duk without permission. Enlil once again revealed a mocking expression. That man is but a young 5th-level magus. He'd better pray for his own luck to wander around this dangerous continent. As for what will happen in Duk, even you can't predict it. Yun-Nam-Na said, You don't have to worry about what will happen to this sorcerer. Anyway, I have won the bet. Don't forget that besides Amon, there are still descendants of the people of Duk alive. You can't stop them from returning to their ancestral land. Enril nodded indifferently and said, I won't stop them, but you can't directly help them either. That sorcerer has already helped you win the bet. Are you still not going to let him go? Yun-Nam-Na laughed again. He is very handsome and interesting. I am very interested in him. Enril sighed. Another poor man has fallen into your hands. I mourn for his bleak life in advance. Yun-Nam-Na stopped laughing and immediately showed an angry expression. Enril, don't you care too much about other people's business? Enlil turned a blind eye to her anger and said indifferently, Which man who won your favor ever had a good ending? This has nothing to do with me. It's your own business. But don't forget, when you leave my divine realm this time, you can't use your divine power. And Humbaba is guarding the Euphrates River. How are you going to cross it? Yun-Nam-Na snorted angrily. If Humbaba listens to your order and stops me, I can also use my divine power. Enril shook his head. Humbaba won't stop you. He wants to keep a few more of his 9 heads. But in the Euphrates River, there are his descendants, the ferocious snakes lurking in the river. I hope that young man named Amon won't be the first one to fall into misfortune among all the men you have ever fallen in love with. Haha, if it weren't for his ability, he would have been dead already. At the moment, Amon didn't know that the Yun-Nam-Na he met was Murin, the patron of Duk. He also didn't know that Murin and Enril had made a bet, and he had helped Murin win the bet. What was more interesting was that Amon was only a 4th-level sorcerer, but both Enril and Murin said that he was a 5th-level sorcerer. After watching Yun-Nam-Na leave, Amon scanned the surroundings with detection magic. After making sure that no one was following him, he waited for a while, and then walked towards the Euphrates River. Amon's original plan was to cross the river and head east. Madanzo had told Amon that if he wanted to go to Babylon City, he had to cross the Euphrates River, but not at night, because there were giant crocodiles and even more terrible monsters in the river. It was said that those monsters were the descendants of Humbaba, the patron of the Euphrates River. They only came out at night. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't swim across the river. He could only take a ferry at noon. Amon didn't need a ferry. His bone was an invisible ship. But after what happened in Som, Amon didn't want to use it easily. A few god stones had already caused so much trouble. If this precious sacred object was recognized, wouldn't there be no end of trouble? The moon was bright. Standing by the river, Amon could even vaguely see the fields and villages on the other side. If he used the invisible ship to cross the river, it would be hard to avoid being seen. If it happened to be a mage, he could tell at a glance that someone was casting magic with the help of an incomparably magical artifact, and it might be very troublesome. At night, he might be attacked by monsters, but in the daytime, it would be even more inconvenient. People on both sides of the river could see clearly. He thought for a while and decided to go further downstream and find a ferry to take a ferry. He wasn't in a hurry, so it didn't matter if he walked slowly. First, he would find a place to rest for the night. He was really tired today. Amon walked along the grassy riverbank for a short distance and sat down in a hollow between 2 small hills. He remembered that it was time to make something for Schrödinger. The cat slept very soundly today. So many things had happened along the way, but it didn't even snore. After taking off the leather bag from his shoulder, Amon was about to carry Schrödinger out of the bag when he heard a hiccup. Schrödinger jumped out of the bag lazily, stretching its limbs and shaking its fur as if it was stretching its muscles and bones. Looking at the 2 bottles of wine in the bag, Schrödinger had already drunk 1 bottle. Amon asked with a smile, "Schrödinger, you left another bottle of wine. Is it for me or for yourself tomorrow?" Schrödinger had not paid much attention to him for the past year, but Amon was used to joking and coaxing the cat. He didn't expect it to respond today. Schrödinger stretched out its paw and began to write on the mud. Amon was surprised and quickly stood up to look carefully in the moonlight. He saw that Schrödinger had written, "Don't look for me, I will come back for you. Be careful of that woman, don't let her see the bones, don't anger her, and don't ever her, or you will be in trouble." Amon was stunned. "What do you mean? Don't you want me to look for you? Are you going somewhere? Who is that woman? Are you talking about Yun-Namna?" Schrödinger did not answer Amon. It stretched out its paw and quickly erased the writing on the ground, then turned around and ran to the hill next to it. With a swoosh, it disappeared into the grass. It was not easy to find a cat that ran away in the middle of the night, and Amon's detection magic could not detect Schrödinger, so there was no way to chase it. He knew the magic of this cat, and its behavior could not be measured by common sense. Since Schrödinger said it would come back for him, there was no use for Amon to be anxious. Looking at the message left by Schrödinger, it was clear that it wanted him to be careful of Yun-Namna. That girl was not an ordinary shepherdess, Amon could already see that, but what else was hidden about her identity? Schrödinger reminded Amon, "Don't ever her." The divine text in the middle was empty, and it did not say that he could not do anything to Yun-Namna, so there was infinite space for imagination. But judging from the relationship between a young man and a woman, it was probably that kind of thing. And at the same time, Schrödinger said, "Don't anger her," clearly telling Amon not to offend this woman, and then it ran away without any explanation. Amon sat there thinking for a long time, and decided to listen to Schrödinger. He trusted this cat to get to where he was today, but in his heart, he wondered if he would meet Yun-Namna again. There was no use thinking about things that he could not figure out, so Amon immediately shook his head and settled down. This was a good habit of his. He used water element magic to wash his hair, body, and the old clothes on his body, and then put on a new set of coarse linen clothes that he bought today, and the pair of soft-soled cloth shoes that he had bought from the tailor's shop. It was really comfortable, and he had to thank Yun-Namna for asking for the shoes. He put the old clothes and the new set of clothes in his leather bag, and kept the bone at the bottom of the bag. This was the holy relic of the temple of Isis, the rib of Osiris, the god of the underworld. It could not be detected with detection magic. As long as Amon did not take it out in public, no one would know that he had this bone. In fact, the same was true for Schrödinger. Even the most brilliant master of magic, if he did not see it with his own eyes, would not know that Amon had hidden a cat in his leather bag. Meditating with magic every night had become a habit of Amon. Not only could it restore his strength and energy, but it could also bring peace to his mind. In this state, Amon would habitually test the power of his magic. It was not a specific kind of magic, but the ability to communicate with the outside world contained in his spirit. This was the foundation of all magic. At midnight, when the moonlight was at its softest, Amon's extremely peaceful state of mind seemed to feel a trace of disturbance. It was not any kind of distracting thought, but a germination of power. He did not use detection magic, but he seemed to see his heart and body, as well as the moonlight, mountains and rivers outside his body. This kind of seeing was a kind of feeling. He felt that there seemed to be a power of the same origin as his divine power, in the world, pervading everywhere, almost indiscernible, but deep, vast, and boundless. The source of a mage's power was to sense the laws of nature, communicate with them, and control them. Only by reaching this state could one understand the true mystery of many magic spells. According to Bear's notes, this was the state that only 5th-level mages could reach. But Amon was only a 4th-level mage. He opened his eyes doubtfully, frowned, and fell into deep thought. He did not remember when he came to the test of advancement, let alone breaking through to the 4th level of body arts and the achievement of a 4th level mage. If he continued to practice, he would have to face the test of the devil's temptation. About this test, Bear's notes were vague. He did not say what the devil was, or what the temptations were. Crazy Old's note was also vague, only saying that it needed to experience all kinds of things in the world. Amon wondered if he had made a mistake. But since this had happened, he might as well try his magic. He sat there and waved his staff. From his point of view, nothing changed around him. But if someone were to look in this direction from afar, they would find that the moonlight shining between the two mountains had suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a shadow. The place where Amon was could not be seen clearly. This was the space shielding spell. Amon not only hid himself, but also cut off the sound. In theory, only a 5th level mage who had mastered the control of power could do this. At this moment, he succeeded with his staff. Amon did not interrupt the magic, because he was surprised. He keenly sensed a little change. The vague power that permeated between heaven and earth seemed to be fluctuating with him. Continuing to use this kind of magic for a long time would consume a lot of magic power. How could he achieve a stable state? There should be another way to use it. He took out 5 parangons, placed them beside him, and gradually activated them. Although he was sitting still, he felt like a drop of water floating in the ocean, resonating with the power of nature. It took him a while to find the right way. He used the power of the 5 parangons to communicate with the omnipresent power of the law of nature. Finally, he achieved a stable state of resonance. Looking from afar, the shadow under the moonlight had disappeared. It was still a hazy valley, as if everything was normal. But Amon was nowhere to be seen. Amon had created an abstract space of his own. But he did not need to continuously consume the magical power of the spatial masking technique. As long as the 5 parangons were kept in this stable and orderly state of activation, he could lurk inside for a long time. The joy of success made Amon even more confused. He had a better way to verify it, which was to take out the Taraculus and read the message left in it. Every time Amon advanced, he would read a new message in the Taraculus. So he took out the Taraculus and activated it with his magic. Sure enough, he heard Crazy Ol's voice again. Ha ha ha, Amon, you've finally become a 5th level mage and passed the devil's temptation. I don't know if I should congratulate you or comfort you. You must have experienced many hardships in the world. This test can be the easiest or the hardest. Everything happens without you knowing it. When you look back, you'll suddenly realize it. But no one can explain it in advance, because no one can replace your own experience. I can't either. Next, Crazy Ol explained the changes in the power that could be used from the low-level magic, awakening of power, to the advanced magic, control of power. The elemental magic that Amon first learned was the application of the power of the law of nature. But when he first awakened this power, he could not fully sense and control it. At this stage, the power that could be used was much more ingenious. Crazy Ol did not introduce the specific methods of practicing magic, but the principles of application of various magic. Then there was another piece of information that Amon had never come across before, which was the various magic formations. Magic formations were not the result of a mage's own practice, but their function was very ingenious. They could combine the power of many people to achieve a special effect, and they could also communicate with the power of nature according to a certain law. There were also many magic formations that could help mages practice certain special abilities. For example, Crazy Ol himself had set up a magic formation to create a cold spring. So far, Crazy Ol had taught Amon everything that a mage could learn. The content included the making of scrolls, staffs, magic artifacts, the arrangement of magic formations, and the methods and principles of application of all kinds of magic. Even a top supreme mage could not be proficient in all kinds of magic arts and skills, and the direction of their practice must be focused on. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.